Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The night Wade Kincaid started hearing the voices, he'd been working the southern Arizona border patrol route for almost 6 years. He knew every mile of that desolate stretch between Sasabe and 3 Points, knew which arroyos filled fastest during monsoon season, which dirt roads washed out first, which abandoned ranch houses the coyotes used as waypoints for human trafficking operations. The desert out there didn't change much. It was reliable in its emptiness, in the way the heat rose off the hardpan in shimmering waves during the day, and how the cold settled into your bones at night. That's why the radio call bothered him so much. It came through at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October, when the temperature had dropped into the low 50s, and Wade had the heater running in his patrol unit. He was parked on a ridge overlooking Highway 286, watching for headlights that moved too slow or too fast. The telltale signs of smugglers or traffickers making their runs under cover of darkness. The radio crackled with static first. That wasn't unusual. The terrain out there played hell with radio signals, all those hills and valleys creating dead zones and interference. But then came the voice, male, older, strained. Station 12 to dispatch. We have a situation here. Need immediate backup. Station 12 to dispatch. Do you copy? Wade picked up his handset. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm picking up some kind of cross-traffic on the main channel. You getting this? Loretta Miles came back almost immediately. She'd been working dispatch for the county sheriff's department longer than Wade had been alive, and her voice had that cigarette-roughened quality that made everything sound urgent, even when it wasn't. Negative, Unit 7. Main channel is clear. What are you hearing? Male voice calling for backup. Says he's at Station 12. Wade paused, frowning at his radio. We don't have a Station 12, do we? There was a long silence, long enough that Wade thought he might have lost signal. Then Loretta came back, and something in her voice had changed. Gone quieter. Station 12 was decommissioned in 1987. Buildings still out there, about 15 miles southwest of your position. Been empty for almost 40 years. Wade felt something cold move through his chest. You're telling me I just heard a call from an abandoned station? I'm telling you the main channel is clear from my end, Loretta said. Could be equipment malfunction. Could be some kid with a radio playing games. You want me to log it? Yeah, log it. Wade set the handset down and stared out at the darkness beyond his windshield. The desert stretched away in all directions, invisible under the moonless sky, except where his headlights cut a wedge of pale illumination across the dirt and scrub. 15 miles southwest would put the old station somewhere near the border fence, in one of the most remote sections of his patrol area. He'd never been out there, never had a reason to. The roads that far south were barely roads at all, just washboard tracks that punished your suspension and took an hour to cover 10 miles. Nothing out there but rattlesnakes and Border Patrol's motion sensors, the kind that pinged when a coyote crossed the line. The radio crackled again. Same voice. More urgent this time. Station 12 to any unit. We are under attack. Repeat. Station 12 is under attack. Multiple hostiles. Officer down. Need immediate assistance. Wade grabbed the handset so fast he nearly dropped it. Dispatch, you're sure you're not getting this? Getting what, Unit 7? The distress call, Station 12, says they have an officer down. Another pause, shorter this time. Wade, I'm looking at my board right now. Every channel is clear. Are you feeling all right? He wasn't. His heart was hammering against his ribs and his hands had gone cold despite the heater pumping warm air across his lap. I'm fine. I'm hearing it clear as day on the main channel. Someone's calling for help. Station 12 has been empty since before you were born, Loretta said. And now there was something almost gentle in her voice, the way you'd talk to someone who was having a bad dream. There's no power out there. No working equipment. Just an empty building slowly falling apart. Wade closed his eyes and listened. The voice came again, breaking up now, fragmented by static. Under heavy fire, can't hold them. If anyone can hear this. Station 12, send help. I'm going out there, Wade said. Wade, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but someone needs help. You're talking about driving 15 miles into the middle of nowhere based on a radio call that only you can hear. Loretta's voice had gone flat. That's not protocol. That's not even close to smart. Log my position. I'm heading southwest on Ranch Road 12. If I'm not back on the radio in 2 hours, send someone after me. Wade put the truck in gear before Loretta could argue. The last thing he heard before he started driving was her voice, resigned and worried, saying she'd make the log entry. The road south was worse than he remembered. Ranch Road 12 was really just 2 tire tracks through the creosote and mesquite, barely visible even with his high beams on. The truck bounced and lurched over rocks and through dry washes, and twice Wade had to stop and get out to move fallen saguaro skeletons that blocked the path. The temperature kept dropping. By the time he'd covered 5 miles, his breath was fogging in the cab despite the heater. The voice on the radio had gone silent. Wade tried calling out a few times, identifying himself, asking for details, but got nothing back except static. He thought about turning around, thought about it seriously. This was exactly the kind of thing that got deputies killed. Driving alone into remote areas at night based on fragmentary information. He'd sat through the training videos. He knew the statistics. But something kept him going. Maybe it was the desperation he'd heard in that voice. Maybe it was just stubbornness, the need to prove to himself that he wasn't crazy, that he really had heard what he'd heard. Or maybe it was something else, something he couldn't quite name. A feeling that had been growing in his gut ever since that first crackle of static. The feeling that whatever was happening out there at Station 12, it was important. It mattered. The landscape began to change around the 10-mile mark. The creosote gave way to more open ground, scattered with volcanic rock and the skeletal remains of Ocotillo. In the distance, barely visible against the stars, Wade could make out the dark line of mountains. The border was close now. Another 5 miles and he'd be able to see the fence, that 18-foot steel barrier that ran for hundreds of miles through some of the most unforgiving terrain in North America. He almost missed the turnoff. It wasn't marked, just a gap in the brush where another track led west. Wade slowed, studying it in his headlights. The ruts were old, barely visible, mostly filled in with wind-blown sand. Nobody had driven this way in months, maybe years. But according to the GPS unit mounted on his dashboard, this was it. This was the road to Station 12. Wade turned onto it. The track got rougher immediately, forcing him to slow to a crawl. Rocks scraped against his undercarriage and branches screeched along his doors. He was committed now. The brush was too thick to turn around. He'd have to go forward until he found a wide spot, or until he reached the station. The radio crackled. He jumped, his hand instinctively going to the handset. But it was just Loretta, checking in. Unit 7, what's your status? Still en route, about 2 miles out, I think. Wade had to raise his voice over the sound of his truck grinding through the vegetation. Terrain is rough. Any more radio traffic? Negative. It's been quiet for the last 20 minutes. There was something he wasn't saying, something he'd noticed but hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The static on the radio had changed. It wasn't random anymore. It had a pattern to it, almost like breathing. In and out, in and out, steady and slow. "Wade, I've been thinking," Loretta said. "Station 12 was shut down for a reason. There was an incident out there, before my time, but I remember hearing about it." "What kind of incident?" "The bad kind. The kind people don't like to talk about." She paused. "Just be careful out there. And if something doesn't feel right, you turn around. You understand me?" "I understand." But Wade didn't turn around. He kept driving, watching the odometer creep higher, counting down the distance. 1.5 miles. 1 mile. Half a mile. That's when he saw the lights. They were faint at first, just a dim glow through the brush ahead. But as he got closer, they resolved into shapes. Windows. 4 of them, arranged in a square pattern, glowing with a warm yellow light that seemed impossibly bright against the darkness of the desert. Someone was at Station 12. Someone with electricity, with lights. The building wasn't empty. Wade brought his truck to a stop about 100 yards out and killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no insects, nothing but his own breathing and the tick of his cooling engine. He sat there for a moment, studying the building ahead. It was a single-story structure, adobe or stucco, with a flat roof and those 4 windows facing east. The light coming from inside was steady, not flickering like firelight or lanterns. Electric light, which meant power, which meant someone had either brought in a generator or somehow got the old lines working. Wade picked up his handset. "Dispatch, I have eyes on Station 12. Building appears to be occupied." "Lights are on!" The static that came back was so loud it hurt. Wade jerked the handset away from his ear, and through the noise he thought he heard something. Not Loretta's voice. The other voice. The one that had called for help. But the words were lost in the crackling roar, and after a few seconds the radio went completely dead. Not even static, just silence. Wade tried his cell phone. No signal. Not surprising this far out, but it made his chest tighten anyway. He was alone out here, truly alone, and the only thing between him and that lighted building was 100 yards of desert and his own good judgment. He got out of the truck. The cold hit him immediately, sharp enough to make him catch his breath. It had to be in the 40s now, maybe colder. His breath plumed white in the beam of his flashlight as he started walking toward the station. His boots crunched on gravel and sand. The sound seemed too loud, echoing off the rocks and brush. Wade kept his right hand near his sidearm, his left holding the flashlight. The building grew larger as he approached, and he could see more details now. The paint was old and peeling, the stucco cracked in places. But the windows were intact, and that light behind them was warm and steady. 50 yards out, Wade stopped. Something was wrong. It took him a moment to figure out what. The building had no visible power lines, no generator, no solar panels on the roof. Nothing that could account for those lights. He moved forward again, slower now. 30 yards. 20. Close enough to hear something from inside the building. Voices. Faint, muffled by the walls, but definitely voices. Multiple people talking, though he couldn't make out the words. 10 yards from the front door, Wade stopped again. The door was solid wood, painted brown, with a small window set at eye level. The window was dark, covered by something on the inside, but light leaked around the edges, sharp and bright. Wade's hand went to his sidearm. He didn't draw it, not yet, but he wanted the weight of it under his palm. Wanted to know it was there if he needed it. He walked up to the door and knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the silence. The voices inside stopped immediately. The sudden quiet was worse than the talking had been. Wade stood there, waiting, aware of how exposed he was, silhouetted against his flashlight beam. Footsteps approached from inside, slow and heavy. Wade tensed, his hand tightening on his weapon. The door opened. The man standing there was old. That was Wade's first impression. Old and tired, with a face full of deep lines and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He was wearing a uniform, not a modern one. The cut was wrong, the style decades out of date. But it was definitely a sheriff's deputy uniform, complete with badge and name tag. The name tag read, Ashcroft. "Can I help you?" the old man said. His voice was the same one Wade had heard on the radio. He was sure of it. "I'm Deputy Kincaid, Pima County Sheriff's Department." Wade's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I picked up a distress call on my radio, someone calling for help from Station 12. The old man, Ashcroft, stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. It was sad and knowing and maybe a little bit frightened. "You shouldn't have come here, son. Nobody comes here anymore. Not for a long time. Sir, are you all right? Is anyone hurt?" "Hurt?" Ashcroft laughed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across concrete. "We're all hurt, Deputy. Every last one of us. But I don't think there's anything you can do about it." Behind Ashcroft, Wade could see into the building. It looked like the inside of a 1980s police station. Old metal desks, filing cabinets, a coffee pot on a hot plate, and people, 3 or 4 of them, all wearing the same outdated uniforms, all standing perfectly still, watching the door, watching Wade. "I need to check on everyone inside," Wade said, trying to keep his voice professional, trying to ignore the way his heart was hammering. "Make sure no one needs medical attention." "They're all fine," Ashcroft said. "We're all fine. We're just doing our jobs, same as we've been doing for 37 years. 37 years. The number hit Wade like a physical blow. Station 12 had been decommissioned in 1987, 37 years ago. "Sir, I think you might be confused. This station has been closed since the night we died," Ashcroft finished. His smile faded. "October 31st, 1987, Halloween night. You know about that, Deputy? You know what happened here?" Wade took a step back. His hand was on his sidearm now, thumb on the retention strap. "I think you need to come with me, sir. We can get you some help." "Can't leave," Ashcroft said. "None of us can. We have to stay here, keep watch, wait for the call." He glanced over his shoulder at the people inside, then back at Wade. "Same as we've been doing every night since then, waiting for someone to finally come help us." "Help you with what?" Ashcroft's eyes went distant. "They came across the border that night, 8 of them, armed. Cartel, we figured, though we never found out for sure. They hit us fast. We didn't even have time to call it in proper. Station went dark, and then..." He trailed off, his gaze refocusing on Wade. "And then we've been here ever since, trying to radio out, trying to get someone to respond. Nobody ever does, though, nobody except you." Wade's mouth had gone dry. "Sir, what's your first name?" "Reuben. Reuben Ashcroft. I was the senior deputy here, 22 years on the job when it happened." "And the others, the people inside?" "That's Martinez, Chen, and Holbrook. Good deputies. Good people. They didn't deserve what happened." Wade pulled out his phone, knowing already that it wouldn't work, but needing to do something. The screen showed no signal, just like before. He looked back at Ashcroft, at that sad, weathered face, and felt his reality tilting. "You need to leave now," Ashcroft said quietly, "before it gets too late." They come back sometimes, the ones who did this. Still trying to cross, still running their routes, and when they do, he shook his head. When they do, we have to try to stop them. That's our job. That's what we do. But it doesn't go well. It never goes well. Come with me, Wade said. All of you. Come back to town. We'll figure this out. Can't leave the station. Ashcroft's hand came up to rest on the door frame, and in the light spilling from inside, Wade could see through it. See the wood grain of the frame right through Ashcroft's palm and fingers. We're tied here, all of us. Tied to this place and what happened in it. Wade stumbled backward, his boot catching on a rock. He nearly fell. This isn't real. You're not real. Real enough to call for help. Real enough to be heard, finally, after all these years. Ashcroft smiled again, that same sad expression. Go home, Deputy Kincaid. Go home and forget about Station 12. Nothing here but old ghosts and older sins. The door started to close. Wade wanted to run, wanted to bolt back to his truck and drive away as fast as the terrain would allow. But something made him call out. Wait, the people inside. Can I talk to them? Ashcroft paused. Why? I need to know this is real. I need to know I'm not losing my mind. For a long moment, Ashcroft just looked at him. Then he pushed the door open wider. Come in, then. But don't stay long, and don't go outside the light. Wade's every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to turn around and leave. But he'd come this far. He'd heard the call for help. He'd driven 15 miles through the desert at 3 a.m. to answer it. He couldn't just walk away now. He stepped through the door. The inside of Station 12 smelled like old paper and coffee and something else. Something Wade couldn't quite identify. Dust, maybe, or time. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting everything in that flat, institutional glow that he recognized from his own station. But everything here was wrong. The equipment was ancient. The furniture looked like it came from a government surplus catalog in the 80s. And the calendar on the wall was dated October 1987. The 3 people Ashcroft had named were still standing in the same positions. All of them watching Wade with expressions that were hard to read. Not hostile, exactly. Just waiting. This is Deputy Kincaid, Ashcroft said to them. From Pima County. He heard our call. One of them, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a bun, stepped forward. Her name tag read Martinez. You actually heard us? On my radio, you called for backup. We call every night, she said. Her voice was soft, almost wondering. Every single night for 37 years. You're the first person who ever answered. Wade looked around the station. Everything looked solid, real, physical. But he remembered the way Ashcroft's hand had been translucent in the doorway. What happened here? The truth. The one named Chen spoke up. He was young, younger than Wade, with a face that still had traces of teenage softness. Cartel hit team. They were supposed to make a run across the border that night, but we were here. We saw their vehicles, called it in, or tried to. They cut the phone lines first, Holbrook added. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a voice that rumbled. Then they hit us, fast and hard. We didn't have a chance. Martinez wrapped her arms around herself. It was over in less than 5 minutes, all of us down. Ashcroft lasted longest. He kept trying to call it in on the radio even after... She trailed off. Even after I was shot, Ashcroft finished. Bled out at that desk over there, but I got the call out first. Told dispatch we were under attack. Told them to send help. His eyes met Wade's. Help never came. The station went dark. Cartel burned the building afterward to cover their tracks. Whole place burned to the foundation. Everything inside was destroyed. Wade felt his legs go weak. Then what am I standing in? The memory of it, Ashcroft said. The echo. The station as it was that night, before everything went wrong. We're stuck here in those last few minutes before the attack. Living it over and over, calling for help, waiting for someone to come. But the building is still there, Wade said. I can see it from outside. It's real. Ruins are real, Ashcroft agreed. Burned out shell with no roof and no windows. Animals have been living in it for decades. But we see it different. We see it like it was. Wade moved to one of the windows and looked out. For a moment, he saw what he'd seen before. His truck parked in the desert, the beam of his headlights cutting through the darkness. Then the view shifted, flickered, and he was looking at something else entirely. Multiple vehicles, with their lights off, parked in a rough semicircle around the station. Armed men moving between them, checking their weapons. That's what we see, Martinez said from behind him. Every night, the same thing. Wade jerked away from the window. I need to leave. Smart choice, Ashcroft said. He walked Wade to the door. One more thing, though. One more thing you need to know. What? We're not the only ones out here, not the only ones tied to what happened. The men who killed us, some of them died too. Not here. But close enough, in the desert, trying to run after they burned the station. Border Patrol caught up with them 10 miles south. There was a firefight, 3 of them went down. Wade's hand was on the door handle now. Why are you telling me this? Because they walk too, Ashcroft said quietly. Different routes, different nights, but they walk. And sometimes they come back here, try to finish what they started. And when they do, we fight them. Every time. Same fight, same outcome. What outcome? Ashcroft's smile was bitter. We lose. We always lose. It's how the night ended, so it's how it keeps ending. Over and over. Wade pulled the door open. The cold air from outside washed over him, and he'd never been so grateful for anything. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Not your fault, son. You weren't even born yet. Ashcroft put his hand on Wade's shoulder, and this time it felt solid, real, warm through Wade's jacket. But do me a favor, when you get back to your station, look up the incident report. Read what really happened that night, and then maybe, if you feel like it, say a prayer or two. For us, and for the ones we couldn't save. Who couldn't you save? But Ashcroft just stepped back and closed the door. Wade stood there for a moment, staring at that dark window, seeing nothing but his own reflection in the glass. Then he turned and walked back to his truck, forcing himself not to run, forcing himself to stay calm, even though every nerve in his body was screaming. He got behind the wheel and started the engine. The radio crackled to life, and Loretta's voice came through, clear and sharp. Unit 7, you've been off the air for 45 minutes. What's your status? Wade looked back at the station. The lights were gone. The building was just a dark silhouette against the stars, and even from here he could see that the roof was missing. The walls partially collapsed. Exactly like you'd expect from a structure that had burned nearly 40 years ago. Unit 7, respond. Wade picked up the handset. His hand was shaking. This is Unit 7. I'm at Station 12. Building is abandoned. No signs of occupancy. Any indication of where that radio call came from? Wade closed his eyes. Negative. Must have been atmospheric interference. I'm heading back now. He put the truck in gear and started the long drive back to civilization. He didn't look in the rearview mirror, didn't want to see if those lights came back on after he left. The radio stayed quiet for the whole trip back. No voices except Loretta's occasional check-ins. But Wade kept thinking about what Ashcroft had said, about the incident report, about the ones they couldn't save. It was almost 6 in the morning by the time Wade pulled into the station. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky, turning the desert from black to gray. Loretta was waiting for him, coffee in hand, with the look of someone who'd been worried and was now trying to hide it. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel like hell." Wade took the coffee gratefully. "Loretta, what do you know about what happened at Station 12? Her face went carefully neutral. "I told you. There was an incident. Tell me more." She sighed and gestured for him to follow her into the records room. It was a small space, lined with filing cabinets and boxes, the accumulated paperwork of decades of police work. Loretta went to one of the older cabinets and pulled out a file folder, yellowed with age. "October 31st, 1987, she said, handing it to him. 4 deputies killed in the line of duty. Ashcroft, Martinez, Chen, and Holbrook. Cartel hit team crossed the border and attacked Station 12. By the time backup arrived, the building was burning, and all 4 deputies were dead." Wade opened the folder. Inside were incident reports, crime scene photos, witness statements. He flipped through them, his stomach churning. The photos showed exactly what Ashcroft had described. A burned-out ruin, bodies covered by tarps, evidence markers scattered across the scene. "They caught the men who did it," Loretta continued. 3 of them died in a shootout with Border Patrol about 10 miles south of the station. The others made it back across the border. Never faced justice. "Did any of the deputies survive long enough to call for help?" Loretta nodded. According to the dispatch logs, Ashcroft made a partial call about 2 minutes before the attack. Said they had eyes on suspicious vehicles, then the line went dead. That was the last anyone heard from Station 12. Wade turned to the next page and found himself looking at photographs of the 4 deputies. Professional shots, probably taken for department IDs. He recognized all of them. Ashcroft, with his weathered face and tired eyes. Martinez with her dark hair and serious expression. Chen looking impossibly young. Holbrook with his massive shoulders and stoic stare. "There's something else," Loretta said quietly. "Something that wasn't in the official report. One of the first responders, old guy named Garrett, he told me something before he retired. Said when they got to Station 12 that night, the radio was still on. Still transmitting, and he swears he heard voices coming through. The dead deputies still calling for help." Wade felt cold all over again. "Did anyone else hear it?" Garrett said the other responders wouldn't admit to it. Didn't want to seem crazy, but he thinks they all heard it. And every year after that, on October 31st, there are reports of radio interference in that area. Voices calling for backup. Voices that sound like they're coming from Station 12. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Because it sounds insane." Loretta took the file back from him and returned it to the cabinet. "Because you were a rookie 6 years ago, and we don't tell rookies about the stations that are haunted. Because most nights there's no interference. No voices, just silence." She looked at him. "What did you see out there, Wade?" He wanted to tell her. Wanted to describe the lights and the people and Ashcroft's translucent hand. But the words wouldn't come. How could he explain what had happened when he barely understood it himself? "Nothing," he finally said. "Just an empty building." Loretta studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, if that's how you want to play it." She headed for the door, then paused. "Wade, if you ever do pick up those voices again, don't answer them. Don't go out there. Some calls aren't meant to be responded to." She left him alone in the records room, surrounded by decades of files and the ghosts of old cases. Wade stood there for a while, thinking about Station 12 and the 4 deputies who'd died there. Thinking about how they were still there, still fighting, still waiting for help that would never come. Finally, he pulled out his phone and opened a browser. He found a list of churches in Tucson, picked one at random, and sent an email asking if someone could say a prayer for Reuben Ashcroft, Martinez, Chen, and Holbrook. 4 deputies who died in the line of duty on Halloween night, 1987. It wasn't much, probably wouldn't change anything, but it felt like something he needed to do. Wade finished his coffee, filed his patrol report, making no mention of lights or voices or men who'd been dead for 37 years, and drove home as the sun rose over the desert. He slept poorly, troubled by dreams of burning buildings and voices calling through static. That night, when his shift started again, Wade requested a different route. Something farther north. Somewhere that didn't take him anywhere near the southern border or the ruins of Station 12. His supervisor approved it without question. Wade never worked that route again. But on quiet nights when he was parked on some lonely road waiting for speeders, he'd sometimes tune his radio to the main channel and listen. Listening for voices. Listening for a call from Station 12. He never heard them again. But he knew they were out there. Still calling. Still waiting. Still fighting the same fight they'd lost 37 years ago. And someday, maybe, someone else would answer that call. Someone else would drive out into the desert at 3 in the morning to find a station that existed somewhere between memory and ruin. Wade just hoped that person would have the sense to turn around before it was too late. Wade didn't talk about Station 12 for 3 weeks. He worked his new northern route, stopped speeders on Highway 86, responded to domestic disturbances in 3 points, and wrote up accident reports on Interstate 19. Normal police work. The kind of thing he'd signed up for when he joined the sheriff's department. But the dreams didn't stop. Every few nights, he'd find himself back at that burned-out building in the desert, watching Reuben Ashcroft's hand turn translucent in the doorway. Sometimes the dreams were exactly like what had happened. The lights in the windows, the voices on the radio, the 4 deputies standing inside their impossible recreation of Station 12. Other times they were worse. In those dreams, Wade would walk through the door and find the station already burning, the deputies screaming for help as flames consumed them, and he'd wake up with his heart hammering and sweat soaking through his sheets. He started drinking more coffee to stay awake on shift, started taking longer routes home to avoid being alone with his thoughts. And he kept checking the incident reports from the southern routes, looking for any mention of radio interference or strange calls near the old border stations. Nothing. Every report was clean, no voices, no distress calls, just the usual traffic stops and smuggling busts and the occasional lost hiker. On a Thursday night in mid-November, Loretta called him into the dispatch room after his shift. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from too many overnight shifts and not enough sleep. There was a fresh cigarette burning in the ashtray on her desk, even though smoking in the building had been banned for years. Nobody ever called her on it. "Sit down, Wade," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her console. Wade sat. His mouth had gone dry. He knew what this was about before she even started talking. "You've been different since that night," Loretta said, tapping ash into the tray. "Jumpy, distracted. I've seen it happen before with deputies who work the southern routes. Something out there gets under your skin. I'm fine. You're not fine. You requested a route transfer based on a radio call that only you heard. You spend half your shift looking like you're waiting for something bad to happen. And Jerry told me you've been asking about old incidents near the border stations." She leaned forward. "What did you see out there, Wade? And don't tell me nothing." I've been doing this job too long to buy that." Wade stared at his hands. They looked steady enough, but he could feel the tremor in his fingers. "If I tell you, you'll think I'm crazy. Try me. I've heard crazier." So Wade told her all of it. The lights in the windows, Ashcroft opening the door, the 4 deputies inside, wearing their 37-year-old uniforms, living in their memory of Station 12. The way Ashcroft's hand had been translucent. The view through the window showing armed men surrounding the building. The conversation about being tied to the place where they died. Loretta listened without interrupting. She finished her cigarette and immediately lit another one. When Wade was done, she sat back in her chair and exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "Garrett was right then," she said finally. "The place really is haunted." Wade felt something loosen in his chest. "You believe me?" "I believe you saw something out there. Whether it was ghosts or stress or equipment malfunction creating some kind of mass hallucination, I don't know. But I believe you're telling me what you experienced." She tapped her cigarette again. "The question is what you're going to do about it." "What do you mean?" "You can't spend the rest of your career avoiding the southern routes. This department is small. We rotate shifts and areas. Eventually you'll end up back down there. And when you do, you need to be able to handle it." Wade shook his head. "I'm not going back to Station 12. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to deal with whatever's eating at you so you can do your job." Loretta stubbed out her cigarette. "Talk to someone. Department has counselors. Or take some time off. But figure it out, Wade. Because this career will kill you if you let it get in your head." Wade stood up. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long. You're a good deputy. Be ashamed to lose you over something like this." He left the station and drove home as the sun came up. Loretta's words stayed with him. She was right. He couldn't spend the rest of his career running from one section of the county because he'd had a strange experience on a desert road. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that going back down there would be a mistake. That some doors, once opened, shouldn't be walked through twice. 3 days later, everything changed. Wade was halfway through his shift on Sunday night when the call came through. Vehicle accident on Highway 286, approximately 12 miles north of the border. Single vehicle, rolled over, driver possibly injured. Wade was the closest unit. He responded immediately, flipping on his lights and heading south. Highway 286 was part of his old route, but it was far enough north of Station 12 that he'd convinced himself it would be okay. Just a standard accident response. Help the driver, call for medical if needed, write up the report, and move on. The accident site was easy to spot. Fresh skid marks led off the highway and down an embankment, where a white pickup truck lay on its side, headlights still burning. Wade pulled over and grabbed his medical kit and flashlight. The night was cold and clear, with enough moonlight to see by even before he turned on his flashlight. "Sheriff's Department," Wade called out as he scrambled down the embankment. "Anyone injured?" No response. The truck's engine was still running, a rough idle that filled the desert with mechanical noise. Wade reached the vehicle and peered through the windshield. The cab was empty. No driver. No passengers. Just an empty pickup with its radio playing softly, some country station out of Tucson. Wade circled the vehicle, checking for blood or signs that someone had crawled away from the wreck. Nothing. The truck was damaged, but not severely. Cosmetic, mostly, with a cracked windshield and a dented roof. Definitely not the kind of accident that would kill someone or leave them unconscious. He tried the driver's door, jammed. The passenger door opened with a screech of metal on metal. Wade leaned inside, killed the engine, and started looking for registration papers. They were in the glove box, along with a cell phone and a wallet. The registration listed the owner as Miguel Torres, with an address in Phoenix. Wade opened the wallet and found a driver's license. The photo showed a man in his mid-30s, dark hair, nervous smile. According to the license, Torres was 36 years old. Wade straightened up and looked around. "Mr. Torres, Miguel Torres, this is the sheriff's department. If you can hear me, call out." The desert swallowed his voice. Wade climbed back up to the highway and radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm at the accident site on 286. Vehicle is rolled but empty. No sign of the driver." Loretta's voice came back immediately. "Copy that, Unit 7. Do you need search and rescue?" Wade looked out at the desert stretching away in all directions. If Torres had wandered off injured and disoriented, he could be anywhere within a square mile by now, and with the temperature dropping into the 40s, exposure was a real danger. "Affirmative. Send search and rescue and alert Border Patrol. We've got a missing driver who might be on foot in the desert." "Copy. Search and rescue is en route. ETA 40 minutes. Wade started a grid search, working outward from the vehicle in expanding circles. He called Torres's name every few minutes and swept his flashlight across the creosote and mesquite, looking for any sign of movement or disturbed ground. The moon was bright enough that he could see fairly well without the flashlight, but he used it anyway, checking under bushes and behind rocks. 20 minutes into the search, Wade found the first footprint. It was clear in a patch of soft sand, a boot print heading southwest, away from the road, deeper into the desert. Wade followed the trail. More prints appeared, some clear, some partial. Torres was moving in a straight line, not wandering, not the behavior of someone injured or disoriented. This was purposeful, like he knew exactly where he was going. The prints led Wade over a small rise and down into a dry wash. The sand here was softer, and the tracks were easier to follow. They headed southwest for another quarter mile, then turned due south, toward the border, toward the area where Station 12 sat in its ruins. Wade stopped walking. His radio crackled with static, that same breathing pattern he'd heard 3 weeks ago. He stared at the footprints leading south and felt his stomach turn over. "Unit 7, this is dispatch. Search and rescue is 10 minutes out. What's your location?" Wade looked at his GPS unit. He was about 8 miles northeast of Station 12. The footprints were heading directly toward it. "I'm approximately 1 mile southwest of the accident site," Wade said into his radio. "I found tracks. Subject appears to be heading south on foot." "On foot? In this terrain at night?" Loretta sounded skeptical. "That doesn't make sense." "I know. But the tracks are clear. He's moving fast and he knows where he's going. Do not pursue alone, Unit 7. Wait for backup." Wade looked at the tracks disappearing into the darkness ahead. Every instinct told him to wait, to let search and rescue handle this. But something else was pulling at him. The same feeling he'd had 3 weeks ago. The sense that this mattered, that it was important. "Copy that, dispatch. I'm waiting for backup." But Wade didn't stop moving. He followed the tracks south, keeping his radio on and his hand near his sidearm. The prints were easier to follow now. Torres was running. Not jogging, not walking fast, actually running. Wade could see where the prints dug deeper into the sand with each stride, could see where Torres had leaped over obstacles instead of going around them. What would make someone run like that after a vehicle accident? Not injuries, not disorientation. Fear, maybe, or something else. The tracks led Wade through a maze of rock formations and dry washes. He was moving into the rougher terrain now, the kind of landscape that would have taken him an hour to cover in his truck. But Torres had run through it in the dark, navigating obstacles that Wade could barely see with his flashlight. After 2 miles, the footprints stopped at the edge of a larger wash. Wade swept his light across the sand and found where Torres had climbed down the bank and continued south. But there were other prints here too. Older ones. Multiple sets, coming from different directions, all converging at this wash and heading south. Wade knelt and examined them. Some were recent, within the last few hours. Others were older, days or even weeks. Different boot sizes, different tread patterns. But all heading in the same direction, all moving toward the same destination. Station 12. Wade's radio crackled. Unit 7, search and rescue is on site at the vehicle. What's your status? I'm tracking the subject. Following footprints south. I'm about 3 miles from the accident site now. 3 miles? Loretta's voice was sharp. Wade, I told you to wait for backup. The subject is moving toward the old border stations. I think he might be headed for Station 12. There was a long pause. When Loretta came back, her voice was quieter. Wade, you need to turn around. Right now. There are other tracks here. Multiple people have come through here recently, all heading in the same direction. I don't care if there are 100 tracks. You turn around and wait for search and rescue. That's an order. Wade stood up and looked south. He couldn't see Station 12 from here. It was still 5 miles away, hidden behind hills and rock formations. But he could feel it, could sense it the same way you can sense someone watching you in the dark. Unit 7, acknowledge. I'm heading back, Wade said. But he didn't move. He stood there, staring at those footprints leading south, and felt something cold settle into his bones. A sound drifted across the desert. Faint, almost inaudible, but unmistakable once Wade registered it. Gunfire, multiple shots, rapid fire, then silence. Wade's hand went to his radio. Dispatch, I'm hearing gunshots. Multiple weapons coming from the south. Border Patrol reports no activity in that sector. Are you sure? Another burst of gunfire. Closer this time. Clear enough that there was no mistaking it. Positive. I'm hearing automatic weapons fire. Requesting immediate backup. All units, we have reports of gunfire in Sector 7, approximately 5 miles north of the border fence. Border Patrol is responding. Unit 7, do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. Wait for backup. Wade drew his sidearm. His training told him to fall back, to wait for the cavalry. But those gunshots were coming from the direction of Station 12, and something told him that Miguel Torres was down there. Maybe already dead. Maybe dying. He started running. The terrain was brutal. Rocks and cacti and loose sand that tried to twist his ankles with every step. But Wade kept moving, following the sound of gunfire, following those footprints that led into the darkness. The shooting stopped after a few minutes. The silence that followed was worse. Wade slowed to a jog, then a walk, trying to control his breathing, trying to listen for any sound that would tell him what he was walking into. He crested a rise and saw it. Station 12 sat in a small valley below, exactly as he'd seen it 3 weeks ago. But this time, the building wasn't glowing with that warm yellow light. This time, it was dark, except for muzzle flashes that lit up the windows in irregular strobes. And there were vehicles surrounding it. 3 of them. Old trucks with their lights off, parked in the same semicircle Wade had seen through Ashcroft's window. Wade dropped to his stomach and pulled out his binoculars. Through the lenses, he could see figures moving around the building. 6 or 7 of them, all armed, all wearing dark clothing. They were firing into the station in controlled bursts, methodical and professional. And inside the station, someone was shooting back. Wade grabbed his radio. Dispatch, I have eyes on Station 12. Multiple armed subjects engaged in gunfire with someone inside the building. I count at least 7 hostiles with automatic weapons. Station 12 is abandoned, Loretta said. There's nobody there. I'm looking at it right now. I can see muzzle flashes from inside the building. Someone is in there and they're under attack. Wade, that building burned down in 1987. There are no walls, no roof, nothing to hide behind. Whatever you're seeing, it's not. The radio dissolved into static. That same breathing pattern, in and out, steady and slow. And through the static, Wade heard a voice, Ashcroft's voice. Deputy Kincaid, you came back. Wade's hand tightened on the radio. Ashcroft, is that you? You need to stay where you are. Don't come down here. This isn't your fight. Who are those men? What's happening? Same thing that happens every night. They come. We fight. We lose. Ashcroft's voice was calm, resigned. It's what we do. It's all we can do. Another burst of gunfire from below. Wade saw one of the station's windows explode outward, and in the flash of light he saw something impossible. The building was intact, not burned, not ruined. It stood there solid and real, exactly as it must have looked in 1987. There's someone else down there, Wade said. A man named Miguel Torres. He was in a car accident. I tracked him here. Torres. Ashcroft's voice changed, got harder. That name's in our files. We've been looking for him. What are you talking about? October 31st, 1987, the night we died. Torres was the one who cut our phone lines. He was part of the hit team. We got most of their names from the bodies Border Patrol recovered, but 3 of them escaped back across the border. Torres was one of them. Wade felt his reality tilt again. That was 37 years ago. Torres would be in his 70s by now. Time works different out here. Past and present, they blur together. Everyone who was part of that night, they get pulled back eventually. The ones who died and the ones who got away. All of us tied to this place, to what happened here. The gunfire below intensified. Wade could see the armed men advancing on the station, moving from cover to cover, closing the distance. And in the windows of Station 12, he could see return fire. Muzzle flashes that came from inside an impossible building that should have been nothing but ruins. I need to call this in, Wade said. Get Border Patrol down here, get backup. They won't see what you see. They'll show up and find an empty desert, no building, no gunfight, just you, alone, talking to your radio and firing at shadows. Then, what am I supposed to do? Ashcroft didn't answer for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was sad. You can watch. Bear witness. Remember that we were here, that we tried. A pause. Or you can leave. Go back to your life. Forget about Station 12. Wade watched the firefight below, watched the armed men getting closer to the station, watched the return fire getting weaker, more sporadic. Ashcroft was right. This was a fight they couldn't win. A fight they'd already lost 37 years ago, now playing out again in some twisted echo of that night. But maybe it didn't have to end the same way. Wade started moving down the slope toward the station. He kept low, using the rocks and brush for cover. His radio was still hissing with static, Ashcroft's voice lost in the noise. The armed men below hadn't seen him yet. They were focused on the station, on the deputies inside, on finishing what they'd started decades ago. Wade got within 100 yards before one of them spotted him. A man in dark clothing turned and raised his weapon. Wade dove behind a boulder as bullets chipped rock inches from his head. More gunfire. The other men were turning now, some toward Wade, some still focused on the station. Wade leaned around the boulder and fired 3 shots, aiming for center mass. One of the men went down. The others scattered, taking cover behind their vehicles. The radio crackled. Wade, what are you doing? I'm stopping this, however I can. You can't stop it. It already happened. All you can do is die with us. Wade fired again. Missed. The men were returning fire now, and he had to duck back behind his boulder as bullets tore through the brush around him. His heart was hammering. His hands were steady. He ejected his magazine, checked it, 6 rounds left, and slammed it back home. 6 rounds against 6 armed men with automatic weapons. The math wasn't good. But then the return fire from Station 12 picked up. Wade heard the sharp crack of rifles from the windows, saw 2 more of the armed men go down. The others were caught in a crossfire now, trapped between Wade's position and the station. They broke, turned, and ran for their vehicles. Wade fired twice more, hitting one in the leg, and then the men were in their trucks and peeling out, heading south toward the border. The silence that followed was absolute. Wade stood up slowly, his legs were shaking. He walked down into the valley, his weapon still drawn, his eyes on the dark ruins of Station 12. Because it was ruins now. The building had collapsed back into reality, just burned-out walls and no roof, exactly as it should have been. No lights, no intact windows, just rubble and ash and the ghosts of what had been. "Ashcroft?" Wade called out. "Are you there?" The radio crackled. "We're here." Wade walked up to what had been the front door. In the moonlight, he could see inside the building now. See the charred timbers and collapsed walls. And standing among the ruins, translucent and fading, were the 4 deputies. Ashcroft in front, the others behind him. "You changed it," Ashcroft said. His voice was full of wonder. "You actually changed it. We drove them off. For the first time in 37 years, we drove them off." "Where's Torres?" Ashcroft pointed. Wade turned and saw a figure slumped against a rock about 20 feet away. Miguel Torres, or the ghost of him, or whatever strange echo he'd become when his car went off the road and brought him back to this place. He was staring at his hands, which were fading in and out, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent. "What's happening to me?" Torres said. His voice was young, much younger than the driver's license photo. "I was just driving. I was heading home, and then I was here, and then they were here. The same men from that night. How is this possible?" Wade holstered his weapon and walked over to Torres. "You were part of a cartel hit team in 1987. You helped kill 4 deputies at this station." "No, that's not... I wasn't..." Torres looked up at Wade. His eyes were wide and frightened. "I don't remember that. I don't remember any of that." "Time to remember," Ashcroft said, walking over. "Time to remember what you did, what we all did. The choices we made that brought us to this place." Torres shook his head. "I want to leave. I want to go home." "Can't leave," Ashcroft said. "None of us can. We're all tied here now. You and us, and the others who died that night. Tied to Station 12, tied to what happened." Wade looked at the 4 deputies. They were more solid now than they'd been 3 weeks ago, more present. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for the next time," Ashcroft said. "They'll come back. They always come back, and we'll fight again. Same fight, night after night until..." He trailed off. "Until what?" "I don't know. Until whatever holds us here lets go. Until justice is served. Until someone remembers us." Ashcroft smiled, that same sad smile. "You helped tonight. Maybe that means something. Maybe it changes things." Wade wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that his intervention had made a difference. But looking at the ruins of Station 12 and the fading ghosts of the men who'd died here, he wasn't sure. This place existed outside normal time, caught in an endless loop of violence and death. One night of fighting back wouldn't break that cycle. "I should go," Wade said. Search and rescue will be looking for me, and I need to report the shooting." "They won't find any evidence," Ashcroft said. "No shell casings, no blood, no tire tracks. Whatever happens here stays here. It's not part of the regular world anymore." Wade's radio came to life. Loretta's voice sharp and worried. "Unit 7, respond immediately. Search and rescue has been looking for you for 40 minutes. What is your status?" Wade picked up the handset. "This is Unit 7. I'm at Station 12. I had contact with multiple armed subjects, but they've fled south. I'm in pursuit." He stopped, looked at the dark desert to the south. "Negative, they're gone. I'm returning to the search area now. Are you injured?" "Negative, I'm fine." "Good, because when you get back here, we're having a very serious conversation about following orders." Wade signed off and looked back at the ruins. The 4 deputies were almost invisible now, fading into the darkness. Only Ashcroft was still clear enough to see. "Thank you," Ashcroft said quietly, "for coming back, for trying to help." "Did I help?" "You were here. You saw us. You believed." Ashcroft's form wavered. That's more than anyone else has done in 37 years. Wade started to walk away, then stopped. "The prayer I asked for, did it help?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe you coming here was the answer to the prayer." Ashcroft smiled. "Either way, it was good to see you again, Deputy Kincaid. Try not to come back a third time. This place takes a piece of everyone who visits. Come too often, and you might not leave." Wade climbed back up the slope to the ridge where he'd watched the firefight. When he looked back, Station 12 was just dark ruins again. No ghosts, no lights, just an empty building slowly crumbling into the desert. He hiked back to the search area. It took him 90 minutes. By the time he arrived, search and rescue had found Miguel Torres's body a quarter-mile from his vehicle. Heart attack, they thought. Probably happened right after the accident. His body was cold, which meant he'd been dead for hours. Wade said nothing about following footprints to Station 12. Said nothing about gunfights or ghosts. He filed a report about pursuing an armed suspect who fled into the desert, and when pressed for details, he said the darkness and terrain had made identification impossible. Nobody believed him, but nobody could prove he was lying either. Loretta pulled him aside at the end of his shift. "You went back there, didn't you? To Station 12. Wade nodded. "And I saw them again. Ashcroft and the others. And I saw Miguel Torres. He was part of the team that killed them in 1987. Loretta lit a cigarette and stared at him for a long moment. "You know how crazy that sounds." "I know. But you believe it." "I was there. I saw it. So yes, I believe it." She exhaled the smoke. "Then I guess you've got a choice to make. You can keep working the northern routes and pretend Station 12 doesn't exist. Or you can accept that there are things out there in the desert that don't make sense, things that don't follow the normal rules, and you learn to live with it." "Which did you choose?" "I've been working dispatch for 32 years, Loretta said. "I hear voices on the radio sometimes, calls from stations that don't exist anymore. Deputies asking for backup in places that haven't had personnel in decades. And I log them, I listen, and I remember that the desert keeps its dead close." She crushed out her cigarette. "Go home, Wade. Get some sleep. And when you come back tomorrow, we'll figure out where you go from here." Wade drove home as the sun rose. He was exhausted, wrung out, but also strangely calm. Station 12 was still out there. The ghosts were still fighting their endless battle, but now he knew the truth, knew what had happened, knew that Reuben Ashcroft and his deputies hadn't been forgotten. That had to count for something. He parked in his driveway and sat there for a moment, watching the light spread across the desert. Then he went inside, took a long shower, and fell into bed. He didn't dream. For the first time in 3 weeks, Wade Kincaid slept without ghosts. Wade stayed away from the southern routes for another month. He worked traffic enforcement on the interstate, responded to calls in the populated areas around Tucson, and avoided thinking about Station 12 as much as possible. But the place had a way of creeping into his thoughts during quiet moments. Late at night, when he was parked on some empty stretch of highway, he'd find himself wondering if Ashcroft and the others were still there, still fighting their endless battle against ghosts from 1987. December brought colder nights and occasional rain that turned the desert into something almost beautiful. Wade was working a Wednesday evening shift when Loretta called him over the radio with an unusual request. "Unit 7, I need you to swing by the station. Someone here wants to talk to you." Wade frowned at his radio. "Can it wait until end of shift? I've got another 3 hours. This person drove 200 miles to speak with you specifically. I think you'll want to hear what she has to say." 20 minutes later, Wade walked into the station and found Loretta sitting in the break room with an elderly woman who looked to be in her late 70s. She had white hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that tracked Wade as he entered the room. Something about her face was familiar, though Wade couldn't place it. "Deputy Kincaid," Loretta said, "this is Eleanor Ashcroft, Reuben Ashcroft's daughter." Wade felt his stomach drop. He looked at the woman again and saw it now. The same bone structure, the same steady gaze. She had her father's eyes. "Mrs. Ashcroft," Wade said, sitting down across from her, "I'm very sorry for your loss." "It was 37 years ago," Eleanor said. Her voice was strong, despite her age. "I've had time to process it, but I never got answers. Not real ones. Just the official story about a cartel attack and my father dying in the line of duty." She leaned forward. "Loretta tells me you've been to Station 12, that you saw something out there." Wade glanced at Loretta, who gave him a small nod. He turned back to Eleanor. "What did Loretta tell you?" "That you had an experience, that you might have seen my father." Eleanor's hands were folded on the table, her fingers intertwined tightly. "I need to know if that's true. I need to know what you saw." Wade took a breath. This felt different from telling Loretta. This was Reuben Ashcroft's daughter, a woman who'd lost her father when she was probably in her early 40s. What he said next would either give her comfort or make her think he was insane. "I saw your father," Wade said quietly. "Twice, at Station 12. He was wearing his uniform. He looked exactly like the photo in the incident report, the one from his department ID." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "What did he say?" "He told me about the night he died, about the cartel team that attacked the station. He said they've been there ever since, him and the 3 other deputies. Still trying to call for help, still fighting the same fight they lost in 1987. "Ghosts," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know what else to call them. They were there, but not there. The building was intact when I looked at it, but when I looked away and looked back, it was ruins again. Your father's hand was translucent. I could see through it." Eleanor wiped her eyes. "Did he seem to be in pain?" "No. Tired, maybe. Sad, but not in pain. That's something, at least." She pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed at her face. "I've spent 37 years wondering if he suffered. If he was afraid, the official report said the attack was fast, that he probably didn't suffer long. But I never really believed that." Wade thought about the firefight he'd witnessed. The desperation in Ashcroft's voice over the radio. "I think it was hard. I think it was terrifying. But your father was brave. He kept calling for help even after he was shot. He saved lives by getting that warning out. Did he have a message for me? For the family? Wade hesitated. He didn't know I'd meet you, but he did say something about the ones they couldn't save. I think he was talking about more than just that night. I think he was talking about everyone who's been lost out there in the desert over the years. Eleanor nodded slowly. That sounds like my father. He always took the job personally. Every smuggling victim, every person who died trying to cross the border. He felt responsible somehow. She looked at Wade. Can you take me there? To Station 12? Mrs. Ashcroft, I don't think that's a good idea. I've been trying to visit that place for 37 years. The county won't give me directions. They say it's too remote, too dangerous. But I need to see where my father died. I need to stand there and say goodbye properly. Wade looked at Loretta, who gave a small shrug. It's a long drive, Wade said. Rough terrain. The road is barely passable. I don't care. I'll ride in your patrol vehicle if I have to. I'll sign whatever liability waivers you want. But I'm going to that station, Deputy Kincaid. The only question is whether you'll take me, or if I'll try to find it myself. There was steel in her voice. Wade recognized it. The same determination he'd heard in her father's voice over the radio. The Ashcroft family didn't give up easy. All right, Wade said. But we go during daylight, and if the road is too rough, we turn back. Agreed? Agreed. They made arrangements to go on Saturday, Wade's next day off. He spent the next 2 days thinking about whether this was a terrible idea. Taking a 70-something woman into the remote desert to visit the place where her father had died, and might still be, in some impossible way, seemed like the kind of decision that could go wrong in 100 different ways. But Saturday morning arrived clear and cold, and Eleanor was waiting at the station when Wade pulled up in his personal truck. She was wearing practical clothes, jeans, boots, a heavy jacket, and carried a small backpack. Ready? Wade asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. I've been ready for 37 years. They drove south through Tucson and then west on Highway 86, the same route Wade had taken dozens of times on patrol. Eleanor was quiet for the first hour, staring out at the desert passing by. Finally, she spoke. My father loved this land, thought it was the most beautiful place on earth. He'd take me and my brother camping out here when we were kids, teach us the names of the plants, show us where to find water, how to read the stars. She smiled. I never understood it. Always seemed like a wasteland to me. But he saw something else. What did he see? Freedom, I think, space, something bigger than himself. Eleanor turned to Wade. When he died, part of me was angry at this place, at the desert, like it had betrayed him somehow. But over the years I realized he wouldn't have wanted to die anywhere else. He belonged here. They turned onto Ranch Road 12 around mid-morning. The track was even rougher than Wade remembered, and he had to slow to a crawl to navigate the rocks and washes. Eleanor braced herself against the dashboard but didn't complain. How much further? She asked, after an hour of brutal driving. Maybe 5 miles. The turnoff to Station 12 should be coming up soon. The morning sun was bright and warm, driving the chill from the air. In daylight, the desert looked different, less threatening, almost peaceful. Wade found the turnoff and followed it west, watching the odometer tick down the distance. When they finally arrived at Station 12, Wade's first thought was that it looked smaller than he remembered. The ruins sat in their small valley, just burned walls and no roof, exactly as they should be. No lights, no intact building, just rubble and sand and the slow work of time and weather. Eleanor got out of the truck before Wade had fully stopped. She walked toward the ruins with steady steps, her backpack over one shoulder. Wade followed, keeping a respectful distance. She stopped at what had been the front door. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the charred timbers and collapsed walls. Then she set down her backpack and pulled out a photograph. She propped it against a rock near the doorway. A family photo, Wade saw, showing a younger Reuben Ashcroft with his wife and 2 children. "Hey, Dad," Eleanor said softly. "Sorry it took me so long to visit. They made it hard to find this place." She pulled out a small flask and poured liquid onto the ground. "That's from the bottle of whiskey you kept hidden in the garage. Mom found it after you died. We've been saving it for something special." Wade stood back and let her have her moment. The desert was silent except for the wind and the occasional call of a raven. No radio static, no voices, just an old woman talking to her dead father's memory in the ruins where he'd died. Eleanor spent 20 minutes there. She talked about her life, about her children and grandchildren, about how her mother had lived to 92 before passing away the previous year. She cried a little, laughed a little, and finally, she stood up and kissed her fingers and pressed them to one of the burned walls. "I love you, Dad. I hope you're at peace now." She walked back to the truck, wiping her eyes. Wade helped her into the passenger seat and they sat there for a moment in silence. "Thank you," Eleanor said finally, "for bringing me here, for telling me what you saw. It helps knowing he's not alone out here." Wade started the engine. "Mrs. Ashcroft, can I ask you something? Your father mentioned that night on October 31st. He said something about people they couldn't save. Do you know what he meant?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. The official report said 4 deputies died, but there were supposed to be 5 on duty that night. A rookie named Danny something. I can't remember the last name. What happened to him? Nobody knows. He was scheduled to work that shift, but he never showed up. They found his patrol vehicle abandoned about 10 miles north of Station 12. Engine still running. Door open, no sign of Danny. They searched for weeks but never found a body. Wade felt cold despite the warm sun. They think he ran? Some people thought that. Others thought the cartel got him first before they hit the station. But my father always believed something else happened. Something that kept Danny from making it to work that night. Eleanor turned to Wade. He talked about it sometimes. Said he felt guilty, like maybe if Danny had been there, things would have gone different. Maybe they could have held the station. Maybe they all would have survived. Wade put the truck in gear and started the long drive back. But his mind was racing. 5 deputies, 4 dead, 1 missing. And Ashcroft's words about the ones we couldn't save took on a new meaning. They made it back to Tucson by mid-afternoon. Eleanor thanked him again and drove off in her rental car, heading back to Phoenix. Wade went home, but he couldn't stop thinking about the missing deputy. Danny something, the rookie who'd never shown up for his shift. That night, Wade went back to the station and pulled the incident reports from October 31st, 1987. He found the names of the 4 deputies who'd died: Reuben Ashcroft, Teresa Martinez, Gary Holbrook, and someone named Vincent Garrett. Not the names he'd been told. Wade frowned and dug deeper. Then he found it. A separate missing persons report filed on November 2nd, 1987. Deputy Daniel Pritchard, age 23, reported missing after failing to report for duty on October 31st. Last seen leaving his apartment in Tucson at 7 p.m., scheduled to arrive at Station 12 by 9 p.m. Never arrived. Vehicle found abandoned on Ranch Road 12 approximately 11 p.m. Wade read through the entire file. Search teams had combed the area for 3 weeks. They'd found no blood, no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away from the vehicle. Daniel Pritchard had simply vanished somewhere between Tucson and Station 12. The file included a photo. Pritchard was young, with dark hair and nervous eyes that reminded Wade of every rookie he'd ever trained. According to the notes, it had been his first week on patrol. His first week, and he'd disappeared. Wade pulled up a map and marked the location where Pritchard's vehicle had been found. It was on Ranch Road 12, right along the route to Station 12. Not quite at the turnoff, but close. Close enough that Pritchard would have been only 10 minutes from the station when something happened. Wade stared at the map. Then he pulled up the duty roster for October 31st, 1987. 5 deputies assigned to Station 12: Ashcroft, Martinez, Holbrook, Garrett, and Pritchard. But only 4 had been there when the attack happened. Where had Daniel Pritchard gone? Wade closed the files and sat back in his chair. He thought about Ashcroft's words about being tied to the place where you died. About Torres being pulled back to Station 12 decades after the attack. About the desert keeping its dead close. If Pritchard had died somewhere along Ranch Road 12 that night, would he be tied there the same way Ashcroft and the others were tied to Station 12? Wade looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. His shift didn't start until tomorrow evening. He had time. He drove south in his personal truck, following Ranch Road 12 in the darkness. The location where Pritchard's vehicle had been found was marked in the file with GPS coordinates. Wade plugged them into his phone and followed the road. 40 minutes later, he pulled over at the spot. It looked like any other piece of desert. Creosote bushes, scattered rocks, sand. Nothing to indicate that a man had vanished here 37 years ago. Wade got out of his truck and stood in the darkness, listening. The wind was picking up, carrying that smell of rain that meant a storm was building somewhere. He walked slowly along the road, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. He almost missed it. Just a glint of metal reflecting his light, half buried in the sand about 30 feet from the road. Wade walked over and knelt down. It was a badge, old and tarnished, but still recognizable. Pima County Sheriff's Department. The name on it was worn almost smooth, but Wade could still make out 3 letters, P-R-I, Pritchard's badge. Wade's radio, sitting in his truck, crackled to life. He could hear it from where he stood, that familiar pattern of static, in and out, like breathing. He walked back to his truck and picked up the handset. "Hello?" The static resolved into a voice, young, male, frightened. "This is Deputy Pritchard requesting assistance. My vehicle has stopped. I can't get it started. I'm on Ranch Road 12, approximately mile marker 7. Request immediate assistance." Wade's hand tightened on the handset. "Deputy Pritchard, this is Deputy Kincaid. What's your status?" "I don't know what happened. The engine just died. Everything died. Radio, lights, everything. Then it all came back on, but something's wrong. Something's very wrong." "What do you mean?" "There are lights coming toward me. Multiple vehicles. No headlights, just running lights, and they're not slowing down." Pritchard's voice rose in pitch. "They're coming right at me. I need to—" The transmission cut off. Wade stood there in the darkness, listening to static, and felt his blood run cold. "Pritchard, Deputy Pritchard, respond!" Nothing, just the wind and the static, and the absolute certainty that whatever had happened to Daniel Pritchard on this stretch of road 37 years ago was still happening. Still playing out, night after night, the same way the attack on Station 12 played out. Wade got in his truck and sat there, staring at the spot where Pritchard's vehicle had been found. Then he put the truck in gear and drove slowly along the road, watching for any sign of what Pritchard had described. Lights. Multiple vehicles. Coming right at him. He saw them about a mile down the road. 3 sets of running lights moving fast, heading north. No headlights exactly as Pritchard had described. Wade pulled over and killed his own lights watching the vehicles approach. They passed him doing at least 70, bouncing and lurching over the rough road. Wade caught a glimpse of dark paint and maybe 4 or 5 people in each vehicle. And then they were passed, heading toward the spot where Pritchard's patrol car had been found. Wade counted to 10, then turned around and followed. By the time he got back to the location, the vehicles were stopped. 3 of them arranged in a triangle around a single patrol car that sat in the middle of the road. An old-style patrol car, the kind they'd used in the late 80s. The door was open. The lights were off. Men were moving around the vehicle, checking the cab, looking in the trunk. One of them pulled something out and held it up, a uniform shirt. Another found a radio and smashed it on the ground. Wade grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I have eyes on what appears to be a 10-34 in progress on Ranch Road 12. Multiple armed subjects attacking a patrol vehicle." Loretta's voice came back immediately. "Unit 7, you're supposed to be off duty. What are you doing out there?" "I found Daniel Pritchard, or what's left of him." "Wade, Pritchard has been missing for 37 years. "I know. But he's here, right now. I'm watching it happen." The men around the patrol car were gesturing to each other now, pointing at the ground, following something. Wade realized with a jolt what they were tracking. Footprints. Pritchard had run. He'd abandoned his vehicle and run into the desert. The men split up, 3 heading into the brush in the direction of the footprints, 3 staying with the vehicles. Wade watched them go, watched their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, and knew exactly what they were going to find. He got out of his truck and started following. The terrain was rough, all rocks and cacti and loose sand. The men ahead of him moved fast, following the trail like professional hunters. And somewhere ahead of them, Wade knew, Daniel Pritchard was running for his life. The chase went on for almost a mile. Wade could hear the men calling to each other, could see their lights converging on a single point. And then he heard something else. A gunshot, then another, then silence. Wade ran toward the sound. He found the 3 men standing in a small clearing, their flashlights pointed down at something on the ground. Wade couldn't see what it was from his position, but he didn't need to. He knew. The men turned and walked back toward their vehicles. They passed within 20 feet of Wade, but none of them looked in his direction. Maybe they couldn't see him. Maybe this was happening in some other time, some other version of reality. Either way, Wade waited until they were gone before moving into the clearing. Daniel Pritchard lay on his back, staring up at the stars. He was young, just as young as his photo, wearing his uniform with the radio still clipped to his belt. 2 bullet wounds in his chest. His eyes were open and empty. Wade knelt beside him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry nobody came for you." Pritchard's eyes moved, focused on Wade. His mouth opened. "Station 12, he whispered. "Need to get to Station 12. They're waiting for me." "They're gone," Wade said. "The station was attacked. The others are dead." "No. They're calling for me. I can hear them on the radio. They need help. I have to go." Pritchard tried to sit up, but the wounds were too severe. He fell back with a gasp. "I have to go. It's my first week. I can't be late. Ashcroft will be angry if I'm late." Wade felt his throat tighten. "You're not late. You did everything right. It's not your fault. I saw them coming, the vehicles. I tried to call it in, but my radio was dead. So I ran. I thought I could find cover, double back, get to Station 12, warn them." Pritchard's voice was fading. "Did they make it? Did the warning get through?" Wade didn't know how to answer that. "You did your best." "My best wasn't good enough." Pritchard closed his eyes. "I can hear them, Ashcroft, Martinez, the others. They're calling my name, telling me to come home." Then go, Wade said. Go to them. You've been lost long enough. Pritchard opened his eyes one more time. He looked at Wade with an expression that was part gratitude, part relief. Tell my mom I'm sorry. Tell her I tried. Then he was gone. Not dead. He'd been dead for 37 years, but whatever had been holding him in that moment, that endless loop of running and dying and running again, it released. Pritchard's form faded, became translucent, and then disappeared entirely. Wade sat there in the darkness for a long time. Finally, he stood up and walked back to his truck. The 3 vehicles were gone. The old patrol car was gone. The road was empty except for Wade and the cold wind and the stars overhead. He picked up his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Go ahead, Unit 7. Cancel that 1034. False alarm, I'm heading home. Copy that. Loretta paused. Wade? You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Just closing an old case. Wade drove back to Tucson as the first drops of rain began to fall. He thought about Daniel Pritchard, young and scared and dying alone in the desert while trying to reach Station 12. Thought about Ashcroft and the others, calling for help that never came. Thought about how the desert kept its dead close, trapped in the moments of their deaths, unable to move forward. But maybe that was changing. Maybe Wade finding Pritchard's badge and bearing witness to what happened had broken the loop. Maybe Pritchard was finally free to go wherever dead deputies went when their duty was done. Wade hoped so. He got home just as the rain started falling in earnest. He went inside, took a long shower, and fell into bed. And for the second time since this all started, he slept without dreams. The next morning, Wade called Eleanor Ashcroft. Mrs. Ashcroft, it's Deputy Kincaid. I found something I think you should know about. He told her about Daniel Pritchard, about the missing deputy who'd never made it to Station 12 on the night of the attack, about finding his badge and witnessing what had happened to him on that dark stretch of Ranch Road 12. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "So that's what my father meant. The ones they couldn't save. He knew Pritchard was out there somewhere, knew he'd never made it to the station. I think Pritchard is with them now," Wade said. "I think he finally made it home." "I hope so." Eleanor's voice was soft. "I really hope so." They talked for a few more minutes, then said their goodbyes. Wade spent the rest of his day off doing normal things: grocery shopping, laundry, watching football on TV, trying to feel normal, trying to pretend the last few months hadn't fundamentally changed how he saw the world. That night, before his shift started, Wade drove out to Ranch Road 12 one more time. He went to the spot where he'd found Pritchard's badge and placed a small marker there. Just a white cross made from wood, the kind you see sometimes along highways where someone died in an accident. He carved 4 names into it: Ashcroft, Martinez, Holbrook, and Pritchard. Then he drove to Station 12 and placed another marker there, identical to the first. He stood in the ruins for a moment, listening to the desert wind. No radio static, no voices, just silence. "Rest easy," Wade said to the empty air. "All of you. Your duty is done." He got back in his truck and drove away. In his rearview mirror, just for a second, he thought he saw lights in Station 12's windows. 4 figures standing in the doorway watching him leave. But when he looked again, there was nothing but ruins and darkness. Wade smiled and kept driving. Some things, he'd learned, you just had to accept. The desert kept its secrets. The dead kept their vigils. And sometimes, if you were lucky and brave and maybe a little bit crazy, you got to help them find peace. 6 months passed before Wade heard from Station 12 again. He'd settled into a routine that included both northern and southern routes. The memories of that October night and everything that followed had lost some of their sharp edges. He still thought about Ashcroft and Pritchard sometimes, usually late at night when he was parked on some lonely stretch of highway. But the dreams had stopped. The radio stayed quiet. Station 12 remained nothing but ruins slowly disappearing into the desert. Wade started to believe it was over, that whatever had been holding those deputies in their endless loop had finally released them, that they'd moved on to wherever the dead were supposed to go. Then April brought the hottest spring on record, with temperatures pushing into the low hundreds even before summer officially started. The desert turned brown and brittle. Water sources dried up, and people started dying in the backcountry. Migrants trying to cross the border, hikers who underestimated the heat, smugglers who got lost on routes they thought they knew. Wade responded to 3 body recoveries in 2 weeks, all of them in the southern sector, all of them within 15 miles of Station 12. The third recovery was the worst. A family of 4, parents and 2 young children, found dead in a wash about 8 miles north of the border fence. They'd been trying to make the crossing on foot, got lost, ran out of water. By the time Border Patrol's sensors picked them up, they'd been dead for at least 3 days. Wade helped load the bodies into the medical examiner's van. The children were small, maybe 5 and 7 years old. They'd died holding hands. That night, Wade couldn't sleep. He kept seeing those kids, kept thinking about how they'd died just miles from water and roads and safety, kept wondering if they'd called out for help in those final hours, if anyone had heard them, if it would have made a difference. Around 3 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep and went for a drive. He didn't have a destination in mind. He just needed to move, needed to do something other than lie in bed, staring at the ceiling. He ended up heading south on Highway 286, following his old patrol route. The night was warm and moonless, the kind of darkness that made the desert feel infinite. Wade drove without thinking, running on autopilot, until he realized he was on Ranch Road 12, heading toward Station 12. He should have turned around, should have gone home. But something pulled him forward, that same feeling he'd had the first night, the sense that this mattered, that he needed to be there. The ruins appeared in his headlights exactly as he'd left them 6 months ago. The wooden crosses he'd placed were still standing, weathered but intact. The building was just collapsed walls and sand. No lights, no intact structure, just the memory of what had been. Wade parked and got out. The desert was silent except for the wind. He walked up to the ruins and stood where the front door had been, remembering that first night when Ashcroft had opened that door and invited him inside. "I know you're gone," Wade said to the empty air. "I know you've moved on, but I wanted to say thank you for trusting me, for letting me help." The wind picked up. Sand skittered across the ruins. Wade turned to leave, and that's when he heard it. Crying. Soft and distant, but unmistakable. A child crying somewhere in the darkness. Wade froze. His hand went to his flashlight. "Hello? Is someone there?" The crying continued. It was coming from the south, from deeper in the desert. Wade grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm at Station 12 and I'm hearing what sounds like a child in distress, requesting backup." Static answered him. Heavy and thick, but without that breathing pattern he'd heard before. This was just interference. Bad signal. Nothing more. Wade tried his cell phone, no service. He was on his own. The crying got louder, more urgent. Wade started walking toward it, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every instinct told him this was wrong. The children didn't cry alone in the desert at 3 in the morning, miles from any road or settlement. But he couldn't ignore it. couldn't take the chance that someone really was out there. He walked for 10 minutes, following the sound. It led him south through rough terrain, over rocks and through washes, always staying just ahead of him, just out of reach. Wade stopped. The crying had stopped too. He stood in a small clearing surrounded by mesquite, breathing hard, his flashlight beam sweeping back and forth across the brush. "Hello? Where are you?" Movement to his left. Wade spun, his light catching a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. Small, child-sized, but wrong somehow. The proportions weren't right. The way it stood wasn't natural. "Are you hurt?" Wade called out, his hand moving to his sidearm. "I'm with the sheriff's department. I can help you." The figure tilted its head. Then it spoke in a voice that wasn't a child's voice at all. Older, male, familiar. "You shouldn't have come back here, Deputy Kincaid." Wade's blood went cold. He knew that voice, had heard it over the radio that first night. But it wasn't Ashcroft's voice. It was one of the others, one of the men who'd attacked Station 12. The figure stepped forward into the light. It looked like a child from a distance, but up close Wade could see it was something else. Something wearing a child's shape like a mask. The features were wrong, too smooth, too perfect, like a doll. And the eyes were completely black. Wade drew his weapon. "What are you?" "The desert keeps its dead close," the thing said in that familiar voice. "You know that. You've seen it. But it keeps other things too, older things. Things that were here long before stations and deputies and border fences." More figures emerged from the darkness, all child-sized, all with that same wrong appearance. They circled Wade slowly, staying just at the edge of his flashlight beam. "The deputies are gone," Wade said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I helped them move on. They're not here anymore. We know. We felt them leave. Felt the station go quiet for the first time in 37 years. The first figure tilted its head again. "That's why we can come here now. The deputies kept us away, kept the old things at bay, but now they're gone, and Station 12 is empty, unguarded." Wade's mind raced. "What do you want?" "The same thing we've always wanted, the same thing we wanted before the white men came with their fences and roads. This land, this desert, free and clean and ours." The figure gestured at the others. "We wear these shapes because you respond to them, because humans can't ignore a crying child. It draws you in, makes you vulnerable." "I'm leaving," Wade said, backing toward the direction he'd come from. "I'm going back to my truck and leaving. You can have your desert." "Too late for that. You've been marked. You answered the call at Station 12. You helped the deputies. You changed what was supposed to happen. The desert doesn't forget that." The figures started moving closer. Wade raised his weapon. "Stay back." "Bullets won't help you here, Deputy. We're not flesh and blood. We're something older, something that lives in the spaces between." Wade fired 3 shots. The reports echoed across the desert, and the figures scattered like smoke. But they reformed a moment later, now closer than before. Now, within arm's reach. Wade ran. He crashed through the brush, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind him he could hear the crying again. Multiple voices now, all around him, crying and laughing and calling his name. He burst out of the mesquite and found himself standing at the edge of a familiar clearing. Station 12. He'd run in a circle and come back to the ruins. The wooden crosses he'd placed were glowing, not with real light, Wade was sure of that, but with something else. A pale blue radiance that pushed back the darkness. The crying stopped. Wade turned and saw the figure standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond where the cross's light reached. They were watching him, waiting. "The markers," a voice said from behind Wade. Not the thing's voice. A woman's voice, familiar. Wade spun and saw Teresa Martinez standing in the ruins. She was translucent, barely visible, but unmistakably there. Behind her, the other deputies materialized one by one. Ashcroft, Holbrook, Garrett, and Pritchard. "We're not gone," Martinez said. "Not completely. We can't be. Not while the station needs protecting." "You're supposed to be at peace," Wade said. "I helped you move on. You helped us rest," Ashcroft said, stepping forward. "Helped us stop fighting the same battle over and over. But this place still needs guardians, still needs someone to stand watch, to keep the old things at bay." "We thought we were fighting the cartel," Holbrook added. "Thought that's what killed us. But the cartel was just the excuse, the mechanism. What really happened that night was that the old things saw an opportunity, saw a way to drive the Guardians away from this place." Pritchard spoke up, his voice stronger than Wade remembered. "Station 12 isn't just a building. It's a threshold, a place where the barrier between the normal world and the other world is thin. That's why it was built here. The old-timers knew. They put stations at the thin places to keep them watched, to keep things from crossing over." Wade looked at the 5 deputies. "Then why did you call for help that first night? Why did you want me to come here?" "Because we needed to be released from the loop," Ashcroft said. "Needed to be freed from constantly reliving our deaths. But we also needed someone to understand, someone to remember, someone to keep coming back. Someone to take over the watch when we couldn't anymore," Martinez finished. Wade shook his head. "I'm not a ghost. I can't guard this place the way you did." "You don't have to die here to be a guardian," Ashcroft said. "You just have to be willing to come when called, to respond when the desert needs help, to keep the old things from crossing over into the world of the living." The child-shaped figures at the edge of the clearing were moving now, testing the boundaries, looking for gaps in the light from the crosses. "We can't hold them much longer," Garrett said. "Our connection to this place is fading. We've rested too long, become too distant from what we were." "What happens if they cross?" Wade asked. "They'll spread," Pritchard said. "Move beyond the desert, find cities, towns, places where there are lots of children to mimic, lots of vulnerable people to draw in. The desert keeps them contained, keeps them hungry but weak. Let them out and they'll feast." Wade looked at the glowing crosses, at the 5 translucent deputies, at the things circling in the darkness. Then he made a decision. "Tell me what to do." Ashcroft smiled. "Same thing we did. Stand watch. Come when the desert calls. Keep the thin places guarded." He gestured at the ruins. "You've already started. The markers you placed, they're not just memorial. They're wards, symbols of sacrifice and duty. They keep the boundaries strong. Will I end up like you? Trapped here after I die? Maybe. Or maybe you'll train someone else before that happens. Pass on the duty the way we're passing it to you." Ashcroft held out his hand. "This is your choice, Wade. We can't force you. But if you walk away now, Station 12 goes dark. The old things cross over, and everything that happens after that is on both of us." Wade looked at that translucent hand, thought about the family he'd helped to recover that afternoon, about all the people who'd died in this desert over the years, about the ones who'd die in the future if something wasn't here to keep watch. He reached out and shook Ashcroft's hand. It felt like shaking hands with cold air, but it also felt real, solid, true. "I'll do it," Wade said. The moment the words left his mouth, he felt something change. The desert seemed to expand around him, becoming more than just sand and rock and brush. He could sense it now, could feel the thin places scattered across hundreds of miles, could hear the whispers of old things that lived in the spaces between. And he could feel Station 12, feel it like a weight on his shoulders, a responsibility he'd carry for the rest of his life. The 5 deputies began to fade. Ashcroft was the last to go, his smile the final thing to disappear. "Thank you," his voice echoed, "for everything." Then Wade was alone in the ruins. The cross's glow had faded to normal wood. The child-shaped things were gone, driven back into whatever darkness had spawned them. Wade stood there for a long time, feeling the desert around him, feeling his new connection to it. Finally, he walked back to his truck and drove north toward civilization. His radio crackled to life. Loretta's voice worried. "Unit 7, you've been off the air for 2 hours. What's your status?" Wade picked up the handset. "This is Unit 7. I'm heading back to the station. Sorry for the radio silence. I was dealing with something at Station 12. "Again? Wade, you need to stop going out there. That place isn't healthy for you. I know, but someone needs to keep an eye on it." Loretta sighed. "Fine, just be careful, all right? The desert does things to people, gets in their heads." "I will be." Wade drove back to Tucson as the sun began to rise. He thought about what he'd agreed to, about being a guardian for a place that existed between worlds, about spending the rest of his career, and maybe beyond, keeping watch over thin places in the desert. It should have terrified him, should have made him want to quit his job and move somewhere far away from Arizona and its haunted borderlands. But instead, Wade felt something else, a sense of purpose, of belonging. He'd been searching for meaning in his work ever since he'd joined the department. Now, he'd found it in the most unlikely place possible. He got home and managed a few hours of sleep before his evening shift started. When he reported for duty, he found a note on his desk. It was from the sheriff, requesting Wade's presence in his office. Wade walked down the hall and knocked on the door. "Come in," the sheriff called. Sheriff Raymond Talbot was in his mid-60s, a career lawman with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen just about everything. He gestured for Wade to sit. "I've been hearing things about you," Talbot said without preamble. "Hearing that you've been spending a lot of time out at the old border stations, particularly Station 12. Wade kept his expression neutral. "I've responded to a few calls in that area, yes sir. Calls that only you seem to hear." Talbot leaned back in his chair. "I talked to Loretta. She says you've been picking up radio interference, voices from stations that have been closed for decades. The desert plays tricks with radio signals sometimes. That's what I thought too. For about 30 years. Talbot pulled out a file and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a much younger version of himself in a deputy's uniform. "Before I was sheriff, I worked patrol, southern routes, and I spent more nights than I care to remember at Station 12. Wade felt his pulse quicken. "Sir?" "I was there the night it burned. November 1st, 1987. I was part of the first response team." Talbot's voice went quiet. "I heard them on the radio. The deputies. Calling for help even after they were dead. I saw things that night. Things I couldn't explain, things I've never talked about. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that the job isn't just about traffic stops and domestic calls. Sometimes it's about standing between the world people know and the things they don't want to believe in." Talbot closed the file. "Station 12 needs a guardian. Has needed one since Ashcroft and his team died. I did the job for as long as I could, but I'm getting too old, too far from retirement. I can't make the drive out there anymore." "You've been watching Station 12 all these years?" Once a month, sometimes more if things got active. Kept the wards fresh, kept the boundaries strong, made sure nothing crossed over. Talbot met Wade's eyes. But I felt it last night. Felt something change. Felt the duty pass to someone else. Wade didn't know what to say. He'd thought he was alone in this. Thought he was the only one who'd taken on the responsibility of guarding Station 12. There are others, Talbot said, reading his expression. Not many, but some. Deputies and rangers and border agents who've been to the thin places, who've seen what lives in the desert. We don't talk about it much. Don't want people thinking we're crazy, but we do the work, keep the watch, make sure the boundaries hold. How long have you known about me? Since that first night. I felt it when you answered Ashcroft's call. Felt when you drove out to Station 12. I've been keeping an eye on you ever since, making sure you were ready for this. Talbot stood and walked to his window. He looked out at the desert visible beyond the station parking lot. This is a lonely job, Wade. People will think you're obsessed. They'll worry about you. Suggest you take time off or see a counselor. But you can't stop. Because if you do, if the Guardians stop watching, the old things will cross over. And that can't happen. I understand, sir. I hope so. Because once you take on this duty, it doesn't let go. You'll feel Station 12 even when you're hundreds of miles away. You'll hear it calling, and you'll have to answer no matter what else is happening in your life. Talbot turned back to Wade. I'm giving you official authorization to patrol the southern sectors as often as you want. I'll make sure you're not questioned about it. But Wade, be careful out there. The desert keeps its dead close, and sometimes the living too close as well. Wade left the sheriff's office with more questions than answers, but he also left with a sense of validation. He wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things. Station 12 was real, the deputies were real, and the responsibility he'd taken on was real too. That night, Wade drove his patrol route with new awareness. He could feel the desert around him, could sense the thin places scattered across his sector. Most were quiet, stable. But here and there he felt disturbances, places where the boundary between worlds was weakening, places that would need watching. His radio stayed quiet until just before midnight. Then it crackled with familiar static. Unit 7, this is Station 12. All quiet here. How copy? Wade smiled and picked up the handset. Copy, Station 12. Good to hear from you. Just checking in, making sure you're still out there. I'm here. I'll always be here. Good. The desert needs guardians. Glad you're one of them now. The static faded. Wade continued his patrol, watching the darkness, listening to the radio, keeping the boundaries strong. Somewhere to the south, Station 12 stood in its ruins. Empty. Silent. But not unguarded. Never unguarded. The months that followed fell into a pattern. Wade worked his shifts, responded to calls, wrote reports. Normal police work. But once or twice a week, he'd drive out to Station 12. He'd check the markers, walk the perimeter, make sure the boundaries were holding. Sometimes he'd hear voices on the radio. Sometimes he'd see translucent figures moving in the ruins. Sometimes it was just him and the desert wind. But always he felt the weight of the duty, the responsibility to stand watch, to keep the thin places guarded, to make sure the old things stayed in their darkness. Eleanor Ashcroft called him one more time, about a year after their trip to Station 12. She wanted to know if her father was at peace. Yes, Wade told her. He's at rest now, but he's also still there in a way, still watching over that place, still doing his duty. That sounds like Dad, Eleanor said. Always on duty, even after death. They talked for a while longer. and Wade found himself telling her about becoming a guardian, about taking on the watch that her father had kept for so many years. Eleanor listened without interrupting, and when Wade finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," she said finally. "For honoring his memory, for continuing his work. It means more than you know." Wade thought about that conversation often in the years that followed, about duty and sacrifice, and the weight of responsibility that some people carried without anyone else knowing. He thought about Ashcroft and Pritchard and the others who'd died at Station 12, about Sheriff Talbot and all the other guardians who watched the thin places. And he thought about the choice he'd made that night in the ruins. The decision to take on a burden that most people would never understand. To spend his life standing between the normal world and the things that lived beyond it. It was a lonely job, just like Talbot had warned. But it was also important, necessary, real. Wade Kincaid had answered a call for help on a cold October night, and that single decision had changed everything. Had led him down a path that most deputies would never walk, had made him a guardian of places where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. He drove his patrol routes through the Arizona desert, watching and listening, keeping the thin places guarded. And sometimes, late at night when the radio crackled with static, he'd hear a familiar voice. "Station 12 to Unit 7, all quiet here." And Wade would smile and pick up his handset and respond. "Copy, Station 12. I've got the watch." Because that's what guardians did. They kept the watch. They held the line. They stood between the darkness and the light, making sure the boundaries held. And they never, ever abandoned their posts, even in death. Sergeant Clay Henshaw had been working the desolate stretch of Highway 180 between Silver City and the Arizona border for 11 years when he responded to the accident that shouldn't have existed. It was a Tuesday night in late September, the kind of evening when the temperature dropped fast after sunset, and the sky turned that particular shade of purple-black that made the stars look close enough to touch. The call came in at 9:47 p.m. A single-vehicle accident, Highway 180 northbound, approximately mile marker 41. Possible injuries. A trucker had called it in on his CB radio after seeing what looked like fresh skid marks and a vehicle in the ditch. Clay was about 15 minutes south when he got the call. He acknowledged it, flipped on his light bar, and headed north. Highway 180 was one of those roads that looked straight on a map but drove like a snake, winding through high desert terrain dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. This time of year, with the afternoon heat gone and the night chill settling in, the road could be dangerous. Animals crossing, sudden curves, patches of black ice if you got high enough in elevation. Clay had worked dozens of accidents on this stretch. Rollovers mostly, where someone took a curve too fast or swerved to avoid a deer. Usually, they were straightforward. Render aid, call for medical transport if needed, document the scene, and move on. Clean and simple. This one wasn't going to be simple. Clay reached mile marker 41 and slowed, scanning the roadside with his spotlight. The trucker had been right about the skid marks. They were fresh, dark rubber laid down in two long parallel lines that curved off the highway and disappeared into the scrub. Clay pulled over, grabbed his flashlight and medical kit, and started down the embankment. The vehicle was about 30 feet from the road, nose down in a shallow arroyo. It was an older sedan, maybe 15 or 20 years old, with New Mexico plates. The driver's side door was open. The headlights were still on, casting weird shadows across the rocks and brush. "State Police," Clay called out. "Anyone injured?" No response. The desert was quiet except for the wind and the tick of the sedan's cooling engine. Clay approached carefully, his flashlight beam sweeping across the scene. No blood on the ground. No obvious signs of trauma. But also no driver. Clay looked inside the vehicle. The keys were still in the ignition. A purse sat on the passenger seat. The airbag had deployed, which meant the impact had been hard enough to trigger the sensors, but the damage to the car looked minimal, mostly cosmetic. Not the kind of accident that would hurt someone seriously unless they weren't wearing their seatbelt. He grabbed the purse and checked for ID. Found a wallet with a driver's license belonging to June Hollister, female, age 34, address in Deming. The photo showed a woman with dark blonde hair and tired eyes. According to the license, she was an organ donor and 5'6". Clay radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm at the scene on Highway 180, mile marker 41. Vehicle is abandoned. Driver's license shows June Hollister, age 34. No sign of the driver. I'm going to do a perimeter search." "Copy, Unit 12. Do you need backup?" "Negative, not yet. Stand by." Clay started searching the area around the vehicle, calling June's name, looking for footprints or signs that she'd wandered off disoriented. Sometimes accident victims got confused, walked away from their vehicles, ended up lost in the dark. But the ground here was rocky and hard-packed. If June had left footprints, Clay couldn't find them. He widened his search, working in expanding circles. The desert at night was a tricky place, easy to get turned around, easy to step wrong and break an ankle in a hidden wash or hole. If June was out here injured, she needed help fast. 15 minutes into the search, Clay found something that made him stop cold. It was a license plate, not attached to a vehicle. Just lying on the ground about 50 yards from the accident scene, half buried in sand and wind-blown debris. Clay picked it up and brushed it off. New Mexico plate. The numbers read KLM 447. Clay pulled out his notepad and checked the plate number from June's vehicle. It was different. Her plate read TNR 832. So where had this other plate come from? Clay looked around. There were no other vehicles visible. No signs of another accident. Just this single plate lying in the dirt like someone had dropped it years ago. He carried it back to his patrol unit and ran it through the system. The results took a few minutes to come back, and when they did, Clay had to read them twice to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding. Plate KLM 447 was registered to a 2001 Honda Accord Silver, owned by Elias Darnell of Albuquerque. The vehicle had been reported stolen in October 2008, 15 years ago, and according to the notes in the file, the vehicle and its driver had never been found. Clay stared at the screen in his patrol unit. 15 years. This plate had been lying out here in the desert for 15 years, and nobody had found it until tonight. What were the odds of that? He radioed dispatch again. "I need you to run a name for me. Elias Darnell, Albuquerque. Should have a missing persons report from October 2008. Stand by, Unit 12. Clay got out of his patrol unit and walked back to the edge of the road, looking down at June's abandoned sedan. The headlights were still burning. The engine was still ticking. Everything about the scene suggested this had just happened. Minutes ago, not hours. But where was June? Dispatch came back. Unit 12, I have that information. Elias Darnell, male, age 28 at time of disappearance. Reported missing October 19, 2008, after failing to arrive at a family event in Las Cruces. Last known location was Highway 180 near mile marker 41. Vehicle was never recovered. Mile marker 41. The exact spot where Clay was standing right now. Dispatch, did that report mention an accident? Negative. Just that Darnell was traveling on Highway 180 and never arrived at his destination. Search teams found no evidence of an accident or foul play. Case remains open and unsolved. Clay felt something cold move through his chest. 15 years ago, a man had disappeared on this exact stretch of road. Tonight, a woman had vanished from the same location, and Clay had just found the license plate from the man's vehicle lying in the dirt near the woman's crash site. This wasn't a coincidence. Couldn't be. Dispatch, I'm going to need that backup now, and get me search and rescue. We have a missing driver, and this is starting to look complicated. Copy, Unit 12. Backup is en route. ETA 20 minutes. Clay walked back down to June's vehicle and started documenting everything with his camera. The skid marks, the position of the car, the open door, the deployed airbag. He photographed the license plate where he'd found it, careful to mark the spot with a small flag from his evidence kit. As he worked, he became aware of how quiet it was. The wind had died down. No traffic passed on the highway. Even the usual night sounds, insects, small animals moving through the brush, had gone silent. It felt like the desert was holding its breath. Clay's radio crackled. Not dispatch, just static, heavy and persistent, with an odd rhythm to it, almost like breathing. He grabbed the handset. Unit 12 to dispatch, are you trying to reach me? The static continued. Through it, Clay thought he heard something. A voice, faint and distorted, but definitely a voice. Male, young. Speaking words Clay couldn't quite make out. Dispatch, I'm getting interference on the main channel. Can you repeat your last transmission? Unit 12, we haven't transmitted. Your channel is clear from our end. The static got louder, and now Clay could hear the voice more clearly. Not speaking to him, speaking to someone else. Having a conversation Clay was only hearing one side of. Don't know where I am. The car just stopped. Everything went dark, and then Clay's hand tightened on the radio. Hello? This is Sergeant Henshaw, New Mexico State Police. If you can hear me, identify yourself. The voice didn't respond to him. It kept talking, oblivious to Clay's attempts at communication. Marker 41, I think. I was heading to Las Cruces. I need help. Can anyone hear me? Clay's mouth went dry. Las Cruces. That's where Elias Darnell had been headed 15 years ago. Are you Elias Darnell? Clay asked into the radio. The static cut out immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Clay stood there in the darkness, his radio handset pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. Then a different voice came through. Female, frightened. Please help me. I don't know where I am. My car went off the road and now I can't find it. Everything looks the same. I've been walking for hours, but I can't find the highway. Please, if anyone can hear this, I'm lost. I'm so lost. June, Clay said. June Hollister? This is Sergeant Henshaw. Where are you? I don't know. I can't see anything. It's so dark. I tried to follow my headlights back to the road, but they disappeared. Everything just disappeared. Stay calm. Can you see any landmarks? Anything you can describe? Just rocks and bushes. And, wait, I see something. There's a light. Someone's out here. They're waving at me. Oh, thank God. Someone found me. June, wait. Don't approach anyone until I can verify. They're calling my name. They know my name. They're saying they'll help me get back to the road. June, listen to me. Do not follow that person. Stay where you are. I'm coming to find you. But the radio had gone dead again. Not static this time. Just empty silence. Clay grabbed his flashlight and started running, following the rough direction he thought June might have gone. He called her name, sweeping his light across the desert, looking for any sign of movement. Behind him, headlights appeared on the highway. Backup was arriving. But Clay couldn't wait. If June was out here following someone, or something, into the desert, every second counted. He ran for 5 minutes, then 10. calling June's name until his voice went hoarse. The terrain got rougher, all loose rocks and hidden washes. Clay nearly twisted his ankle twice, saved only by luck and reflexes. Then he saw it, a light in the distance, not a flashlight beam, something else, a soft, diffuse glow that seemed to hover about 4 feet off the ground. "June!" Clay shouted. "June, if you can hear me, call out." The light moved. It drifted slowly to the left, bobbing slightly, like someone walking while carrying a lantern. Clay ran toward it, his own flashlight beam bouncing wildly. He got within 30 yards before the light suddenly went out. Clay stopped, breathing hard, sweeping his flashlight across the area where the light had been. Nothing, just empty desert. No person, no June, no source for the glow he'd seen. Clay's radio crackled again. This time it was his backup, Officer Raymond Vance, calling from the accident scene. "Sergeant Henshaw, where are you? We've got a situation here." "I'm about a quarter-mile northeast of the scene, following a possible sighting of the missing driver." "What's the situation?" "You need to see this. Get back here." Something in Vance's voice made Clay turn around and start jogging back toward the road. He reached the accident scene to find 2 more patrol units parked there, their light bars painting the desert in alternating red and blue. Vance was standing near June's sedan with another officer, both of them staring at something. "What is it?" Clay asked as he approached. Vance pointed at the ground near the driver's side door. "We found footprints, but they don't make sense." Clay looked down. There were footprints, all right. Fresh ones in a patch of soft dirt near the vehicle. Bare feet. Small, probably women's size 6 or 7. They led away from the car, heading northeast, the same direction Clay had been running. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that the footprints came back. They made a loop, heading out about 20 feet and then returning to the car, ending at the open driver's door. As if June had gotten out of the car, walked around in a circle, and then gotten back in. Except the car was still empty. "There's more," Vance said. He led Clay around to the passenger side. There, in another patch of soft dirt, were more footprints. Different ones, larger. Men's boots, size 10 or 11. These prints also made a loop, heading out into the desert and then coming back to the car. "We counted 4 different sets of prints," Vance said quietly, "all making the same pattern, walking out, walking back, all ending at the car. But there's nobody here." Clay felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Search and rescue on the way? 20 minutes out. Get them here faster, and I want this whole area cordoned off. Nobody else gets close to this vehicle until we figure out what the hell is going on." Clay walked back to his patrol unit and sat in the driver's seat, trying to organize his thoughts. This was wrong, all of it. The missing driver, the old license plate, the voices on the radio, the strange light in the desert, the footprints that went nowhere. He pulled up the missing persons file for Elias Darnell again and read through it more carefully. Darnell had been 28 years old, an accountant, making the drive from Albuquerque to Las Cruces to attend his sister's wedding. He'd called his sister around 9 p.m. to say he was running late, but would be there by 11. That was the last anyone heard from him. Search teams had focused on Highway 180, particularly the stretch between Silver City and Deming. They'd found nothing. No vehicle, no body, no evidence. It was like Elias Darnell had simply ceased to exist somewhere along that road. And now June Hollister had disappeared from the exact same location. Clay looked at the clock on his dashboard. It was 10:43 p.m. June's accident had been called in at 9:47. That meant she'd been missing for less than an hour. But according to her voice on the radio, she thought she'd been walking for hours. Time was doing something strange out here. Search and rescue arrived with dogs and thermal imaging equipment. They spread out from the accident scene, covering a 2-mile radius. Clay joined them, walking grid patterns through the desert, calling June's name, watching the dogs work. They found nothing. No trace of June. No scent trail the dogs could follow. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. By midnight, the search coordinator was ready to call it for the night and resume at first light. But Clay couldn't let it go. He kept thinking about those footprints, about the voice on the radio saying she'd been walking for hours, about the light he'd seen in the desert. "Give me 1 more hour," Clay said to the coordinator. "Let me check something." He drove north on Highway 180, moving slowly, studying the roadside. He passed mile marker 42, then 43, then 44. At mile marker 45, he pulled over and got out. The desert here looked the same as it did everywhere else along this stretch. Rocky soil, scattered vegetation, mountains visible in the distance. But something made Clay stop here, some instinct he couldn't name. He walked out into the brush, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. 50 yards from the road, he found something that made him stop. A car, old and rusted, half buried in sand, partially hidden by a large juniper. Clay approached carefully and shined his light on the license plate. KLM 447, Elias Darnell's vehicle. The one that had been missing for 15 years. It was here, just 4 miles from where June's car had gone off the road. Clay walked around the vehicle, examining it. The driver's side door was open, just like June's had been. The interior was filled with wind-blown sand and debris, but there were no remains inside, no body, no bones, nothing that indicated what had happened to Elias Darnell. Clay radioed in his discovery. Within 30 minutes, the site was crawling with officers and crime scene techs. They documented everything, took photographs, began the process of recovering the vehicle. But they didn't find Elias Darnell, just his car, abandoned and empty, hidden in the desert for 15 years. Clay stood back and watched the techs work. His mind was racing. 2 disappearances, 2 vehicles abandoned, both at almost the exact same location. 15 years apart. What was happening on this stretch of highway? As dawn broke over the desert, Clay drove back to mile marker 41. June's vehicle had been towed away, but the scene was still marked with evidence flags and tape. Clay got out and stood where the car had been, looking around in the growing light. That's when he saw them. More footprints. Fresh ones, leading away from where the car had been. Heading southwest this time, into rougher terrain. They were bare feet, small, women's size, June's footprints. Clay grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I have fresh tracks at the mile marker 41 scene. Requesting search and rescue return immediately." "Copy, Unit 12. They're en route." But Clay didn't wait. He started following the tracks, moving as fast as he could while keeping the trail in sight. The footprints led him through arroyos and over rocky ridges, always heading southwest, always moving deeper into the desert. After a mile, the prints stopped at the edge of a small wash. Clay looked around, trying to figure out which direction they'd continued. That's when he noticed something strange about the wash itself. The sand at the bottom was disturbed, not by wind, by something else. It looked like someone had been digging. Clay climbed down into the wash and started carefully moving sand away with his hands. A few inches down, his fingers touched something that wasn't sand or rock. Fabric. Clay dug faster, his heart hammering. The fabric was attached to something. He cleared more sand and felt his stomach drop. It was a body, partially buried, wearing clothes that looked like they were from the early 2000s. A man based on the size and build. Clay grabbed his radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch, I have found human remains approximately 1 mile southwest of mile marker 41. I need crime scene and the medical examiner immediately." The response took a moment. "Copy, Unit 12. Everyone is en route. Are you at a secure location?" "Affirmative. The site is—" Clay stopped. He'd heard something. A sound carried on the wind, crying, a woman crying. "June!" Clay called out. The crying got louder. It was coming from further up the wash, around a bend in the natural channel. Clay left the body and moved carefully up the wash, his hand on his sidearm. The crying continued, desperate and frightened, echoing off the rocks. He rounded the bend and stopped. June Hollister was sitting on the ground with her back against a boulder. She was barefoot, her feet bleeding from walking across rough terrain. Her clothes were torn and she was covered in dirt and scratches, but she was alive. "June," Clay said, approaching slowly. "I'm Sergeant Henshaw. You're safe now. I'm here to help you." June looked up at him. Her eyes were wide and empty, like she was looking through him rather than at him. "He said he would help me find the road," she said softly. "He said he knew the way, but he lied. He brought me here and then he just disappeared." "Who? Who brought you here?" "The man from the car, the one who was waving at me. He knew my name. He said—" June trailed off, her gaze going distant. "He said he'd been waiting, said he finally wasn't alone anymore." Clay felt cold all over. June. What did this man look like? Young, dark hair. He was wearing a suit, but it was all dirty. And his car was just sitting there in the dark, like he'd been driving and just stopped. June focused on Clay again. "Where am I? How long have I been out here?" "About 8 hours, since last night." June shook her head. "No, that's not right. It's been days. I've been walking for days. I can't find the highway. Every time I think I'm getting close, everything just turns around. The rocks and the bushes, they move, or I move. I can't tell anymore." Clay knelt down beside her. "You're okay now. I'm going to get you to a hospital, get you checked out." "He's still out here," June whispered. "The man from the car. He said he can't leave, said the desert won't let him. Said I can't leave either now, that once you stop at mile marker 41, you're here forever." "That's not true. I'm going to get you out of here." But even as Clay said it, he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. Because he'd seen the footprints that went in circles, had heard the voices on the radio, had found Elias Darnell's car hidden in the desert for 15 years. And now he'd found the body of someone buried in a wash, with June Hollister sitting nearby talking about a man who'd been waiting, a man who couldn't leave. Clay helped June to her feet and started leading her back toward the road. Behind them, in the wash, the partially buried body waited for the crime scene techs to uncover it. And somewhere out in the desert, Clay was certain, Elias Darnell was still wandering. Still trying to find his way back to the highway. Still waiting for the next driver to stop at mile marker 41. The medical examiner's preliminary report came back 3 days after Clay found the body in the wash. The remains were male, approximately 25 to 30 years old at time of death, and had been buried for somewhere between 10 and 20 years. Dental records were being processed, but Clay already knew what they'd show. The body was Elias Darnell. June Hollister was in the hospital in Silver City, being treated for dehydration, exposure, and severe psychological trauma. The doctors said she was physically fine, considering. But mentally, she wasn't talking much. She'd sit in her hospital bed staring at the wall, and when anyone asked her what happened out in the desert, she'd just shake her head and say she couldn't remember. But Clay had seen her eyes. He knew she remembered. She just didn't want to talk about it. Clay had taken 3 days off after the incident. His lieutenant suggested it, said he needed time to decompress after the stress of the search and recovery. But Clay hadn't been able to rest. He kept thinking about mile marker 41, about the voices on the radio, about June saying the rocks and bushes moved. That time didn't work right out there. He'd gone back to the station and pulled every accident report and missing persons case filed along Highway 180 for the past 30 years. What he found made him call his lieutenant at home at 11 o'clock at night. "This better be good, Henshaw," Lieutenant Frank Cordova said, his voice rough with sleep. "Sir, I've been going through the archives. Highway 180, specifically the stretch between mile markers 40 and 45. It's 11 p.m., Clay. This couldn't wait until morning?" In the last 30 years, there have been 14 disappearances along that 5-mile stretch. 14 people who were traveling on Highway 180 and just vanished. No bodies found, no vehicles recovered, nothing. There was a long pause. 14? Most of them were written off as people running away or leaving voluntarily. A few were suspected abductions, but there was never any evidence. The people just disappeared. Clay shuffled through his papers, and, sir, every single one of them was last seen or reported missing near mile marker 41. Another pause, longer this time. "Come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Bring everything you've got." Clay arrived at the state police headquarters in Santa Fe at 7 a.m. Cordova was already there, looking like he hadn't slept much either. Clay spread out his research across the conference table. Incident reports, missing persons files, photographs, maps with locations marked. "Walk me through it," Cordova said. 1994. Amanda Torres, age 19, driving from Albuquerque to visit family in Arizona. Called her mother from a gas station in Silver City. Said she'd be there in a few hours, never arrived. Her car was found abandoned at mile marker 41 3 days later. No sign of Amanda. Clay pulled out another file. 1997. Robert Keene, age 42, truck driver hauling freight to Phoenix. His rig was found on the shoulder at mile marker 42. Engine running, door open, no driver. Robert was never seen again. He continued through the list. 1999, 2003, 2008, Elias Darnell, 2011, 2015, on and on. 14 cases spanning 3 decades, all centered around the same 5-mile stretch of highway. "Why didn't anyone notice this pattern before?" Cordova asked. "Because they were spread out over 30 years. Different investigators, different jurisdictions. Some were handled by us, some by county sheriff, some by tribal police if the person was native. Nobody was looking at the big picture." Clay pointed to the map. "But they all have this in common, mile marker 41. That's the center point, ground zero." Cordova studied the map for a long time. "What's your theory?" "I don't have one that makes sense, but I think something about that location is wrong. The way time worked differently for June Hollister. She thought days had passed when it had only been hours. The footprints that went in circles, the voices on the radio." Clay met his lieutenant's eyes. "I think people who stop at mile marker 41 get caught in something. Some kind of trap or anomaly, and they can't find their way back out. That sounds insane, I know, but how else do you explain 14 disappearances at the exact same location over 30 years? Cordova rubbed his face. "We need to bring in someone who knows this area better than we do. Someone who's been patrolling that highway longer than either of us." He made a phone call. 15 minutes later, a man in his late 60s walked into the conference room. He was Native American, with long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and deep lines around his eyes. He wore a retired state police uniform shirt. Clay, this is Mitchell Eaglefeather. He worked Highway 180 for 35 years before he retired in 2010. Mitchell shook Clay's hand. His grip was strong despite his age. Frank says you've been having trouble with mile marker 41. You know about it? Clay asked. Everyone who worked that highway long enough knows about it. We just don't talk about it. Mitchell sat down and looked at the map. My grandfather told me stories when I was a boy. Said that stretch of road was built over old ground, sacred ground. A place where the members' people used to leave offerings for the spirits. What kind of spirits? The hungry ones. The ones that take. Mitchell tapped the map. In the old stories, there was a place in the desert where people would disappear. Hunters who went out and never came back. Women gathering plants who vanished without a trace. The elders said the land there was thin. That the boundary between this world and the next world wasn't solid like it should be. Clay felt cold. Did your grandfather say how to avoid it? He said, don't stop. Don't pull over. Don't leave your vehicle. If you have to travel through that area, you keep moving and you don't look back. Mitchell's expression was grim. But the state put a highway through there in the 60s, and every few years since then someone stops, and they don't come back. Why didn't anyone report this? Why isn't there a warning? Who would believe it? You can't put up a sign saying warning, supernatural anomaly ahead. And most people make it through just fine. It's only the ones who stop who have problems. The ones who pull over for a flat tire, or because they see something on the side of the road, or because their engine dies. Mitchell looked at Clay. What made June Hollister stop? She said her car went off the road. Skid marks showed she lost control coming around a curve. Or something made her lose control, made her stop. Mitchell stood up and walked to the window. I worked 3 disappearances on that highway during my career. Never found any of those people, but I heard them sometimes. On the radio, late at night, calling for help, saying they were lost, saying they couldn't find the highway. Did you ever try to help them? Once, young woman named Sarah Bingham disappeared in 2004. I heard her voice on my radio calling for help. I went out there, spent 3 days searching, never found her. But I felt it, the wrongness of that place, the way the desert seemed to shift when you weren't looking, the way time stretched and contracted. Mitchell turned back to Clay. I put in for a transfer after that. Couldn't work that highway anymore. Couldn't stand hearing those voices and knowing there was nothing I could do. Cordova looked at Clay. So what do? We can't just ignore this. We need to understand it first, Clay said. I want to go back to mile marker 41, during the day this time. Map the area. See if there's something physical causing this. Maybe underground water or mineral deposits that affect electronics and navigation. And if it's not physical, Mitchell asked, then we figure out what it is and how to stop it. Because June Hollister is alive, which means there's a way to escape. We just need to understand how she did it. Clay spent the next week preparing for his return to mile marker 41. He brought in a geologist to survey the area for unusual mineral formations or electromagnetic anomalies. He contacted the highway department for the original survey data from when the road was built. He even reached out to a professor of folklore at New Mexico State University who specialized in local Native American traditions. The geologist found nothing unusual. The folklore professor sent him 3 papers about thin places in traditional Mimbres cosmology. The highway department's records showed that the stretch of road near mile marker 41 had been rebuilt twice due to unexplained pavement failures. The asphalt would develop cracks and holes without any obvious cause, forcing them to repave the entire section. Clay also visited June Hollister in the hospital. She was scheduled to be released the next day, and the doctors said she was ready to go home. But when Clay sat down next to her bed, He could see she wasn't ready for anything. "June, I need to ask you some questions about what happened out there." She stared at her hands. "I already told you everything. You told me about the man who led you into the desert, the one you thought was helping you. But I need more details. What did he look like? What exactly did he say?" June was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "He looked normal at first, like just a regular person who'd stopped to help. But the longer I was with him, the more I realized something was wrong. His clothes were too clean. He didn't sweat even though it was hot. And his eyes..." She shuddered. "His eyes were wrong, too dark, like there was nothing behind them." "Did he tell you his name?" "He said his name was Elias. Said his car had broken down years ago and he'd been waiting for someone to come help him. But when I asked how long he'd been waiting, he couldn't remember. Said time didn't work right here, that days and years all blended together." Clay felt his chest tighten. "What happened when you realized he wasn't helping you?" "I tried to run, but no matter which direction I went, I kept ending up back at his car. It was like the desert was looped, like I was running in circles even though I was going straight." June looked at Clay with haunted eyes. "He said I'd be there forever now. Said that's what happens when you stop at that place. The desert takes you and doesn't let go. But you got out. You're here. I don't know how. I was sitting against that rock, crying, and then suddenly you were there, like the desert decided to let me go." June grabbed Clay's hand. "Please, don't make me go back there. Don't make me testify or identify anything. I can't go back to that road." "You don't have to, I promise." Clay left the hospital and drove straight back to Highway 180. It was late afternoon, and the sun was starting to drop toward the horizon. He stopped his patrol unit at mile marker 40 and got out, studying the road ahead. From here, it looked normal. Just a curved section of highway cutting through high desert terrain. Nothing sinister. Nothing wrong. But Clay had learned not to trust appearances. He got back in his unit and drove slowly forward, watching the odometer tick toward mile marker 41. As he approached, he felt something change. The air pressure in his ears shifted, like he'd climbed an elevation even though the road was relatively flat. The radio started crackling with static. Clay pulled over at exactly mile marker 41 and killed the engine. He sat there for a moment listening. The static on the radio had that breathing pattern he remembered. In and out. Steady and slow. He grabbed his handheld GPS unit and marked his location. Then he got out of the vehicle and started walking into the desert, following the same path June's footprints had taken. He kept his eyes on the GPS, watching the coordinates update as he moved. After walking for 5 minutes, Clay checked his position. According to the GPS, he'd moved about a quarter mile northeast. He looked back at his patrol unit. It was only 50 yards away. The GPS was wrong. Or the distance was wrong. Or both. Clay marked his location and started walking back toward his vehicle. He counted his steps. 120 steps to cover 50 yards. That was too many. Way too many. He reached his patrol unit and checked the GPS again. It showed he'd walked a quarter mile back, but he'd only taken 120 steps. Space was distorted here, compressed or expanded depending on which direction you were moving. That's why June thought she'd been walking for days. That's why people got lost and couldn't find their way back. The desert was folding in on itself, creating loops and dead ends where there should be straight lines. Clay radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm at mile marker 41 conducting a survey. Everything's stable, but I'm documenting spatial anomalies." "Copy, Unit 12. Are you requesting backup?" "Negative. Just logging my position in case anyone needs to find me." Clay spent the next 2 hours mapping the area around mile marker 41. He discovered that the distortion extended about 100 yards in every direction from the marker. Inside that zone, the GPS readings didn't match the actual distances traveled. The further from the road you went, the worse it got. As the sun began to set, Clay heard a sound that made him freeze. Footsteps, coming from somewhere to his left. He turned and saw a figure walking through the brush, a man in his late 20s, wearing a dirty suit, moving with purpose toward something only he could see. "Elias?" Clay called out. The figure stopped and turned. Clay got his first clear look at the face. It matched the photo from the missing persons file. Elias Darnell, dead for 15 years, but walking through the desert like he'd never stopped. "Can you help me?" Elias said. His voice sounded hollow, distant. "I'm trying to find the highway. I've been walking for hours, but I can't seem to find it." Clay approached slowly. "Elias, I'm Sergeant Henshaw. I know what happened to you. I know you've been lost out here." Elias looked confused. "I just had a flat tire. I pulled over to change it and I got turned around. Everything looks the same out here. But I'll find the road. I have to get to Las Cruces. My sister's getting married." "Elias, that wedding was 15 years ago." "No, it's today. I'm already late. I need to—" Elias trailed off, his expression becoming distant. "I can't remember. How long have I been walking?" "Too long. It's time to stop." "I can't stop. If I stop, I'll never find the road. I have to keep moving. Have to keep looking." Elias started walking again, heading deeper into the desert. Away from the highway. Maybe it's this way, or this way, or... He faded from view, not walking away, just fading, becoming translucent and then invisible, like he'd never been there at all. Clay stood there in the growing darkness, his heart pounding. Elias Darnell was still here, still trapped in the moment of his disappearance, walking in endless circles, unable to find his way out. How many others were out here doing the same thing? How many of those 14 missing people were still wandering the desert, caught in loops they couldn't escape? Clay's radio crackled. Multiple voices now, overlapping and echoing. Men and women of different ages all saying variations of the same thing. "Can anyone hear me? I'm lost. I can't find the highway. Please help. I've been walking for so long. Please, someone, anyone." Clay grabbed his radio. "This is Sergeant Henshaw. I can hear you. All of you. I'm going to help you." The voices stopped. The silence was sudden and complete. Then a single voice came through. Female. Young. "You can't help us. We're not lost. We're taken. The desert took us and it won't let go. It's hungry here, always hungry. Always needing more." "Who are you?" "Sarah. Sarah Bingham. I've been here since 2004. Or maybe longer. Time doesn't work right. But I remember stopping, remember my car breaking down, remember trying to walk back to town." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I remember the desert opening up and swallowing me. I'm still falling. We're all still falling." Clay felt his skin crawl. "Sarah, where are you? Can you see any landmarks?" "I'm everywhere and nowhere. I'm in the space between steps, in the gaps between seconds. The desert folded me up and put me away somewhere safe where I can't escape and can't die and can't do anything but keep walking. I found June Hollister. I pulled her out. That means there's a way to escape. June was lucky. The desert wasn't done with her yet. Hadn't finished folding her away, but the rest of us were too far gone. We're part of it now. Part of the hungry place." The radio went dead. Clay tried calling out, tried reaching Sarah or any of the other voices but got nothing back except static. He walked back to his patrol unit as full darkness settled over the desert. He got in, started the engine, and sat there with his hands on the wheel, trying to decide what to do next. Mitchell Eaglefeather had said the old stories talked about offerings, about leaving gifts for the spirits to appease them. Maybe that's what the desert needed. Maybe that's how to free the people trapped here. Or maybe they were already gone. Maybe what Clay had heard on the radio weren't really the missing people anymore, just echoes. Recordings of their final moments playing on repeat forever. Clay put the patrol unit in gear and started to drive away, but as he passed mile marker 41, his engine died. All the lights went out. Everything went silent. He tried the ignition. Nothing. The engine wouldn't even turn over. Clay's blood went cold. He was stopped at mile marker 41. The exact thing Mitchell had warned never to do. He grabbed his flashlight and got out of the vehicle. The desert around him looked different now. The shadows were deeper. The stars seemed closer. And in the distance, Clay could see lights. Multiple lights bobbing and weaving through the brush, coming toward him. He tried his radio. Dead. He tried his cell phone. No signal. The lights got closer. Clay could see figures now, men and women wearing clothes from different decades, all of them walking with that same purposeful stride toward something only they could see. All of them trapped in their endless loops. One of them stopped and looked directly at Clay. It was a woman in her 40s wearing a business suit from the 90s. "You stopped," she said. "You're not supposed to stop." "My engine died." "They always do. That's how it starts. The engine dies. You get out to check. You walk a few steps away from your car, and then you can't find it again. Can't find the road. Can't find anything except the desert going on forever." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to mile marker 41. You're going to be here a long time." Clay backed toward his patrol unit. "I'm leaving. I'm going to restart my engine and drive away. Good luck with that." Clay climbed back into his vehicle and tried the ignition again. The engine turned over. He nearly sobbed with relief. He put the truck in gear and accelerated, not looking back, not slowing down until he'd put 10 miles between himself and mile marker 41. He pulled over at a rest stop and sat there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. His engine had died at mile marker 41, just like all the others. But it had restarted. He'd escaped. Why? Clay thought about what the woman had said. The engine dies. You get out to check. You walk away from your car. That's when the desert takes you. That's when the trap closes. Clay had gotten out of his vehicle, but he'd come back. He'd refused to walk away. He'd refused to let the desert pull him into its endless loops. That was the key. You had to stay close to the road, stay close to the real world. The moment you walked too far away, the moment you let the desert pull you in, you were lost. But how do you help people who were already lost? People who'd been wandering for years or decades, folded into spaces between spaces, unable to find their way back. Clay didn't have an answer, but he knew he couldn't leave them there. 14 people, maybe more, trapped in an endless desert nightmare. He had to find a way to bring them home, even if it meant going back to mile marker 41, even if it meant risking getting trapped himself, because that's what the job was. That's what being a patrol officer meant. You didn't leave people behind. You didn't give up. You kept searching until everyone was accounted for. Clay started his engine and headed back toward the Santa Fe. He had a lot of research to do, a lot of old stories to read, a lot of preparations to make, because he was going back to mile marker 41. And this time, he was bringing everyone home. Clay spent 2 weeks preparing for his return to mile marker 41. He read everything Mitchell Eaglefeather could provide about the old Mimbres traditions. Stories about thin places, about spirits that dwelled in the spaces between worlds, about offerings and appeasement. He consulted with tribal elders who spoke carefully about places where the earth remembered old hungers, and he studied every missing persons case until he could recite the names and faces from memory. 14 people, 14 souls trapped in an endless desert loop. Clay was determined to bring them home, even if he couldn't bring them back alive. Lieutenant Cordova tried to talk him out of it. "You're talking about going out there and deliberately stopping at the one place we know is dangerous. That's not investigation, Clay. That's suicide. Those people are still out there. I heard them. I saw them. We can't just leave them. They've been gone for years, some of them for decades. What makes you think you can help them now? Because June Hollister got out. Because my engine restarted when it shouldn't have. Because something about that place isn't entirely in control. There are rules, patterns. If we understand them, we can break them." Cordova sighed. "And if you're wrong, if you get trapped out there like the others, then you'll know I tried." Clay requisitioned a new patrol vehicle, something he could afford to lose if things went wrong. He loaded it with supplies, water, food, flares, multiple flashlights, extra batteries, rope, GPS units, and a handheld radio scanner that could pick up frequencies the standard radio might miss. He also brought something Mitchell had given him, a small leather pouch filled with cornmeal and tobacco, traditional offerings to appease hungry spirits. On a Tuesday morning in late October, exactly 1 month after June Hollister's accident, Clay drove south on Highway 180. The sky was clear and cold, the kind of day where you could see for miles across the desert. Perfect conditions. No weather to complicate things. He radioed in his position every few miles. "Unit 12 to dispatch, passing mile marker 35. All systems normal." "Copy, Unit 12. Be advised we have your location tracked via GPS. Search and rescue is on standby if needed." "Copy that." Clay continued south, watching the mile markers tick by 38, 39, 40. As he approached 41, he felt that familiar pressure change in his ears. The radio started crackling with static. He pulled over at exactly mile marker 41 and put the vehicle in park. But he didn't kill the engine. That was the first rule he'd established. Keep the engine running. Maintain that connection to the mechanical world, to the normal rules of physics and time. Clay grabbed his handheld radio and stepped out of the vehicle, leaving the door open. He could hear the engine idling behind him, a steady reminder of the world he'd come from. "Unit 12 to dispatch. I'm on site at mile marker 41. Beginning survey." The response came back distorted, fragments of words buried in static. Clay tried again. Got the same result. The radio was already being affected by whatever lived here. He walked to the mile marker itself and pulled out Mitchell's offering pouch. According to the traditions, you were supposed to speak to the spirits directly. Acknowledge them, show respect. Clay felt ridiculous, but he did it anyway. "I'm here to talk. I know you're hungry. I know you've been taking people. But it has to stop. I'm asking you to release the ones you've taken. Let them go home." The desert wind picked up. Sand skittered across the pavement. And from somewhere in the brush, Clay heard a sound like laughter. Not human laughter, something older and crueler. "You think offerings will work?" a voice said from behind him. Clay spun around. A figure stood near his patrol vehicle. Male, middle-aged, wearing clothes from the 70s, bell-bottom jeans and a faded t-shirt. His face was gaunt and his eyes were wrong, too dark and too deep. "I'm Sergeant Henshaw. Who are you? Does it matter? I've been here so long I barely remember my name. Robert, maybe, or Richard, or something that started with R. The figure tilted its head. You brought offerings. That's cute. But the desert doesn't want cornmeal and tobacco. It wants what it's always wanted. What's that? Time. Life. The moments between heartbeats. The space between breaths. That's what feeds it. That's what keeps it alive. The figure smiled. And you just gave it more by stopping here. Clay felt his vehicle's engine sputter behind him. He turned and saw the hood starting to smoke. The engine was overheating, dying. No, Clay said, moving toward the vehicle. No, that's not how this works. That's exactly how it works. You stop, your vehicle dies. You walk away to investigate or get help. And the desert folds you up and puts you away where you can't leave and can't die and can't do anything except exist in the spaces between. The engine died completely. Clay tried the ignition. Nothing. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, my vehicle has failed. I need immediate assistance at mile marker 41. Static answered him. But through it, Clay could hear voices. Dozens of them. The 14 missing people all calling out at once. Help us! We're lost. Can't find the road. Been walking forever. Please, someone help. It won't let us go. Clay stepped away from his dead vehicle and pulled out his handheld GPS unit. According to the display, he was standing at the correct coordinates for mile marker 41. But when he looked around, the highway seemed farther away than it should be. The perspective was wrong. The desert was already folding him in. You should run, the figure that might be Robert said. That's what they all do. Run and run and run, thinking they can find the highway if they just keep moving. But you can't outrun a place that exists in all directions at once. Clay forced himself to stay calm, to think. June had escaped. His engine had restarted last time. There were rules here, patterns. He just needed to understand them. He looked at the mile marker. It was a simple metal post with reflective numbers, standard highway department issue. But something about it was wrong. The numbers looked faded, old, like they'd been there much longer than they should have. Clay walked over to it and examined it closely. The post was rusted at the base, corrosion that should have taken decades to develop. He knelt down and started digging in the sand around the post's foundation. 6 inches down, his fingers hit something hard. Not rock. Metal. He dug faster, uncovering what looked like an older mile marker post. This one was different, wooden, with hand-painted numbers that had faded to almost nothing. There were markers here before the highway, Clay said, more to himself than to Robert. This was already a marked place. The highway just built over it. Smart cop, Robert said. But knowing doesn't help. You're still here, still stopped, still trapped. Clay kept digging, found another marker beneath the wooden one. This one was stone, with symbols carved into it that didn't look like any language Clay recognized. Mimbers, maybe, or older. The symbols were worn almost smooth, but Clay could still make out their shapes, circles within circles, spirals, lines that seemed to fold back on themselves. Markers to show where the thin place was, Clay said, to warn people away. But the state put a highway through here and covered them up. And now the thin place has a steady supply of food, Robert said. People stopping to change tires, to check their engines, to investigate accidents, all of them folding into the hungry space. Clay stood up and looked at his patrol vehicle. The engine was dead, yes, but the frame was still there, still physical, still connected to the real world. He walked back to it and climbed inside, sitting in the driver's seat with the door open. "What are you doing?" Robert asked. "Staying connected. That's the key, isn't it?" The desert can only take you if you walk away, if you let yourself be pulled into its loops. But if you stay anchored to something real, something physical, you can resist it. For a while. But eventually you'll have to move, have to leave the vehicle, have to walk. And then you're ours. Clay looked at the radio scanner he'd brought. It was still working, still cycling through frequencies. And as it cycled, he heard them. All 14 voices, each one on a different frequency, each one trapped in their own moment of disappearance. An idea formed. Crazy. Probably impossible. But maybe the only chance he had. Clay grabbed the scanner and started recording. He captured each voice, each frequency, each desperate call for help. Then he connected the scanner to his patrol vehicle's external speakers and played them all back at once. The effect was immediate. The overlapping voices created a feedback loop, a cacophony of sound that made the air itself seem to vibrate. And in that vibration, Clay could see something. The desert's folded spaces becoming visible, like looking at a map with all the layers separated. He could see where the missing people were, not in physical locations, in temporal ones, each of them trapped in a different moment, a different fold of space-time, all existing simultaneously in the same geographic location but separated by invisible barriers. "What are you doing?" Robert's voice had changed, become urgent, almost afraid. "I'm showing the desert what it's done, making it look at all of its victims at once, making it acknowledge the weight of what it's carrying." The vibration grew stronger, the air began to shimmer, and one by one, figures began to materialize around Clay's patrol vehicle. Men and women of different ages wearing clothes from different decades. The 14 missing people, pulled from their individual loops and brought together in the same moment. They looked confused, disoriented, but present, more solid than the ghost-like figures Clay had seen before. "How?" one of them said. A woman in her 20s wearing clothes from the 90s. "How did you do that?" "I made the desert pay attention," Clay said. "Made it look at all of you at once instead of keeping you separated. The weight of 14 souls in one place, that's too much. Even for a hungry place like this." The ground beneath them began to shake. The mile marker post started to glow, a sickly green light that pulsed in rhythm with the overlapping voices still playing from Clay's speakers. Robert, or whatever was wearing Robert's shape, took a step back. "You're breaking it. You're breaking the thin place. Do you know what that means?" "It means these people go free. It means the barrier collapses entirely. It means the hungry space doesn't stay contained anymore. It spreads. It grows. It takes everything." Clay hesitated. Could that be true? Was he about to make things worse? One of the trapped people stepped forward. A young man in his late 20s wearing a dirty suit. Elias Darnell. "He's lying," Elias said. His voice was clearer now, more present. "I've been here long enough to understand how this place works. It needs us separated, needs us isolated. That's how it maintains the folds. But if we're all together, if we're all aware of each other, the folds collapse. We either all stay trapped, or we all go free." "And you want to take that chance?" Clay asked. "I've been walking in circles for 15 years. I'll take any chance I can get." The others nodded, murmured agreement. They were tired of being lost, tired of existing in endless loops. Whatever happened next, it had to be better than what they'd endured. Clay made his decision. He turned up the volume on the speakers, letting the overlapping voices grow louder. The ground shook harder. Cracks appeared in the pavement around mile marker 41, spreading outward like a spider web. The mile marker post began to sink, pulling down into the earth. The glow grew brighter, more intense, until Clay had to shield his eyes, and through the brightness he saw something. The hungry space itself. The thing that lived beneath the thin place. It wasn't a spirit or a ghost. It was a void, an absence, a place where reality had worn thin, and something from outside had pushed through. It fed on moments and memories, on the time stolen from travelers who stopped in the wrong place. It had been doing it for centuries, since before the Mimbers, since before any humans had marked this land. But it was old and tired, and carrying 14 people's worth of stolen time was finally too heavy. The void began to collapse in on itself. The brightness turned to darkness. The shaking ground began to still. And one by one the 14 missing people began to fade. Not disappearing, returning. Being released back to the moment they'd been taken from, but with the knowledge of where they were and how to get home. Clay watched as Elias Darnell looked at him one last time. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up, for coming back." Then he was gone, along with the others. The desert fell silent. The speakers stopped playing. The cracks in the pavement sealed themselves. Clay sat in his patrol vehicle, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. He tried the ignition. The engine turned over immediately, running smooth like it had never failed. His radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, this is dispatch. We lost your signal for approximately 20 minutes. What's your status?" I'm fine. Vehicle is operational. I'm heading back now." Clay put the truck in gear and started driving north. He made it about a mile before he had to pull over, his hands shaking too badly to keep driving. He sat there on the shoulder, taking deep breaths, trying to slow his racing heart. His radio crackled again, but not dispatch this time. A different voice. Male, young, familiar. "Sergeant Henshaw, this is Elias Darnell. I don't know if you can hear me, but I wanted to say I made it. I'm back on the highway. I can see Las Cruces in the distance. I'm going to make it to my sister's wedding after all." Clay grabbed his handset. "Elias? Where are you?" "Mile marker 53. I'm not sure how I got here. Last thing I remember clearly was walking in circles near 41, and then suddenly I was back in my car and everything was normal, like no time had passed at all." "Elias, 15 years have passed. Your sister's wedding was a long time ago." There was a pause. "That's not possible. I left Albuquerque this morning." Clay closed his eyes. The hungry space had released them, but it had put them back in the moments they'd been taken from. Elias thought it was still 2008. He didn't know he'd lost 15 years. "Elias, I need you to pull over and wait for me. Can you do that?" Okay, yeah, I'm pulling over now." "Sergeant, what's going on? Why do I feel like something's wrong?" "Just wait there. I'll explain everything when I arrive." Clay started driving again, heading south this time toward the mile marker 53. As he drove, his radio came alive with more calls. Different voices, the other missing people, all of them suddenly back on the highway, all of them confused and disoriented, but alive. Amanda Torres called from mile marker 45, Robert Keene from 48, Sarah Bingham from 39. One by one, all 14 of them checking in, asking for help, not understanding what had happened to them. Clay coordinated with the dispatch, sending units to pick up each of them. By sunset, all 14 had been located and transported to hospitals for evaluation. All of them physically fine. All of them mentally struggling with the realization that they'd lost years, in some cases decades, of their lives. The medical examiner's office quietly closed Elias Darnell's case. The body Clay had found buried in the wash was ruled unidentified, possibly a migrant who'd died trying to cross the desert. The dental records had been inconclusive anyway. That's what the official report said. Clay didn't argue with it. Some things were better left unexplained. June Hollister called him 2 weeks later. "I heard what happened, that you found the others, that you brought them home." "Not home," Clay said. "Just back to the highway. They still have to figure out how to navigate a world that moved on without them. That's more than they had before. More than I would have had if you hadn't kept looking." She paused. "Thank you for not giving up, for believing me when I said something wrong happened out there." After June hung up, Clay drove back out to Highway 180. He stopped at mile marker 41, but this time he didn't get out. He just sat there with his engine running, watching the desert in the fading light. The mile marker post was gone, removed by the highway department after Clay had filed a report about structural damage. The state was planning to rebuild this entire section of road, shifting it 100 yards west to avoid the unstable ground. Maybe that would help. Maybe moving the road away from the old thin place would prevent future disappearances. Or maybe the hungry space would just wait, patient and eternal, ready to take the next person who stopped in the wrong place at the wrong time. Clay's radio crackled with static. For a moment, he thought he heard something, a voice, but it was gone before he could identify it. He put his patrol vehicle in gear and drove away. In his rearview mirror, mile marker 41 receded into the distance. The desert looked peaceful in the evening light. Beautiful, even. But Clay knew better now. Knew that some places were thin, that some hungers were old and patient, and never truly satisfied. He drove back to his station and filed his reports. 14 missing persons cases closed. 14 people returned to the world, even if the world they returned to was no longer the one they'd left. Lieutenant Cordova called him into his office the next day. "I read your report, the official one, and the one you marked classified. And I'm recommending you for commendation. What you did out there, bringing those people home, that's what the job is supposed to be about." Cordova leaned back in his chair. "But Clay, don't ever do anything like that again. We were lucky this time. Next time, we might not be." "Understood, sir." But as Clay left the office, he knew it wasn't really over. The thin place at mile marker 41 might be contained for now, but there were other highways, other mile markers, other places where the boundary between worlds wore thin. And sometimes people would stop in those places, would step out of their vehicles, would walk away from the road and into the waiting darkness. When that happened, someone needed to go looking for them. Someone needed to understand that not all disappearances had simple explanations, that some roads led to places that shouldn't exist. Clay Henshaw had become that someone, the patrol officer who knew about thin places, who understood that the desert kept its secrets close, who was willing to risk getting lost himself to bring others home. It was a lonely job, a dangerous one, but it was necessary, because the highways had to be kept safe, the thin places had to be watched, and the hungry spaces had to be reminded that not everyone who stopped would be taken. Some would fight back. Some would refuse to be folded away and forgotten, and some would return with 14 lost souls in tow, proving that even the oldest and hungriest places could be beaten. Clay drove his patrol route that night with new awareness. He watched for signs of distress, listened for voices on the radio that shouldn't be there, marked the places where the desert felt different. And when he passed mile marker 41, now unmarked and awaiting reconstruction, he slowed down just a little. "I'm still watching," he said to the empty air. "And I'll keep watching, for as long as it takes." The desert didn't answer, but Clay felt certain it had heard him. Some things needed to be witnessed, needed to be remembered, needed to be stood against even when standing against them seemed impossible. Mile marker 41 had taken 14 people, but it had given them back. That was a victory. Small, maybe, but real. And in a job where victories were rare, Clay would take what he could get. He continued his patrol through the New Mexico night, watching the highway stretch out before him, keeping guard over all the places where the world grew thin and hungry things waited in the dark. Because that's what patrol officers did. They kept watch. They protected. They refused to give up.